Hello, dear friends. So glad you could join us at Fiction Domain. Today's narrative adventure is titled, What If an 8-Year-Old Harry Snuck into Hogwarts, put on the sorting hat, and summoned the Goblin Nation. We put our heart into every story we share. If you appreciate our work, showing some love with a like and subscribe would make our day. The story begins now. Chapter 1. The boy who wandered the cupboard under the stairs was colder than usual on this December morning. Harry Potter curled tighter beneath the threadbare blanket, his small body shivering as a draft whistled through the cracks in the door. Outside his cramped sanctuary, he could hear the excited chatter of his cousin Dudley racing down the stairs, each thunderous step sending dust spiraling down onto Harry's face. It's Christmas Eve. Mom. Dad. How many presents did Father Christmas bring early? Harry squeezed his eyes shut. Christmas at number 4, Privet Drive had never been a time of joy for him. Last year, Aunt Petunia had given him a wire hanger wrapped in newspaper while Dudley received 38 gifts. The year before that, Uncle Vernon had made him wash all the dinner dishes while the Dursleys watched Christmas specials on their new television. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch, a single slice of bread with a scraping of butter, punishment for allegedly turning his teacher's wig blue, though he had no idea how that had happened. Boy! Uncle Vernon's voice boomed as meaty knuckles rapped against the cupboard door. Get up. You're to help your aunt with breakfast before we go to Marge's. The lock clicked open, and Harry blinked against the sudden light. He fumbled for his glasses, the right lens cracked and held together with tape, and pushed them onto his nose. Didn't you hear me? Move. Harry scrambled out, his oversized pajamas, once Dudley's, hanging off his thin frame. Yes, Uncle Vernon. In the kitchen, Aunt Petunia thrust a spatula into his hand. Mind the bacon. And don't you dare burn it like last time. Her horse-like face contorted with its usual displeasure at his very existence. Harry stood on tiptoes to reach the stove, carefully turning the sizzling strips. Through the kitchen window, he could see snowflakes beginning to fall, dusting the pristine garden with white. Something inside him ached at the beauty of it. We'll be leaving for Marge's in an hour, Aunt Petunia announced, eyeing Harry with suspicion. You'll stay with Mrs. Fig. Harry's heart sank. Mrs. Fig was a kind enough old lady, but her house smelled of cabbage and cats, and she always made him look at photographs of every feline she'd ever owned. Can't I come with you? The words slipped out before he could stop them. Uncle Vernon's face turned an alarming shade of purple. And have you embarrassed us with your freakishness? After what happened at school? Absolutely not. I didn't do anything to Mrs. Pemberton's wig, Harry protested weakly. I don't know how it turned blue. Enough. Vernon slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes jump. Strange things happen around you, boy, and I won't have it. You'll go to Mrs. Fig's and be grateful we don't leave you in the cupboard for the week. Harry bit his lip, turning back to the bacon. He'd learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. Breakfast passed in misery. Dudley repeatedly kicked Harry under the table while showing off the watch he'd opened early, his 22nd pre-Christmas present. When Harry accidentally dropped a piece of toast, Uncle Vernon banished him to the cupboard until it was time to leave. Sitting in the darkness, Harry hugged his knees to his chest. Something hot and powerful churned inside him, not just sadness, but a desperate longing to be somewhere else. Anywhere else. I wish I could go somewhere where people like me, he whispered into the darkness. Somewhere magical. The air around him seemed to thicken and shimmer. Harry felt a strange tug behind his navel, like an invisible hook yanking him forward. His vision blurred beyond even his poor eyesight, and the cramped cupboard spun around him. Panic seized his chest as the sensation of being squeezed through a tight rubber tube overwhelmed him. Then, with a soft pop, the pressure vanished. Cold air rushed against his face. Harry blinked, disoriented. He was no longer in his cupboard. Instead, he sat on hard ground, snowflakes melting against his pajamas. Ahead of him loomed the most magnificent castle he'd ever seen, its windows glowing with warm light against the winter dusk, towers stretching toward a darkening sky. "I've gone mad," Harry whispered, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Or I'm dreaming." He pinched himself hard on the arm. The sharp pain and the increasing cold seeping through his thin pajamas convinced him this was no dream. Harry scrambled to his feet, shivering violently. Whatever had happened, he couldn't stay out in the snow. The castle ahead offered the only shelter visible across the vast, snow-covered grounds. With no better option, he began trudging toward it, his oversized slippers soaking through within seconds. The journey seemed endless to his small legs. By the time he reached the enormous wooden doors of the castle, Harry's teeth chattered uncontrollably, and he could barely feel his toes. To his astonishment, one of the massive doors stood slightly ajar, a sliver of golden light spilling onto the snow. Harry hesitated only briefly before slipping inside. The entrance hall that greeted him stole what little breath remained in his frozen lungs. Vast and magnificent, it rose several stories high, with a marble staircase dominating the far side. Flaming torches cast dancing shadows on ancient stone walls, and portraits lining the walls appeared to be moving. Harry rubbed his eyes beneath his glasses, certain he was hallucinating from the cold. But no, the painted figures definitely shifted in their frames, some pointing at him and whispering behind painted hands. "Hello." His voice echoed in the cavernous space, sounding impossibly small. No answer came. A delicious aroma wafted through the air, roasting meat, baked pastries, and spices he couldn't name. Harry's empty stomach clenched painfully. Following his nose like a character from a cartoon, he moved toward a corridor on his right. The corridor opened into the most magnificent room he'd ever seen. Four long tables stretched its length, with another table on a raised platform at the far end. Floating candles illuminated the space, but what truly captured Harry's attention was the ceiling, or rather, what should have been the ceiling. Instead, it mirrored the night sky outside, snowflakes seeming to fall before vanishing just above the tables. "It's enchanted," came a soft voice behind him. "To look like the sky outside." Harry whirled around, heart hammering. A tall woman with emerald green robes and a severe bun regarded him with astonishment. Her square spectacles couldn't hide the shock in her eyes as she took in his appearance, from his lightning scar to his wet pajamas and slippers. "Potter," she breathed, as though seeing a ghost. "Harry Potter. How in Merlin's name did you get here?" Harry backed away, panic rising in his chest. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break in. I was in my cupboard and then I was outside in the snow and, your cupboard." The woman's expression shifted from shock to concern. "Child, be calm. You're not in trouble." She approached slowly, as one might a frightened animal. "My name is Professor McGonagall. This is Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." Harry stared at her, certain now that he must be dreaming after all. "Witchcraft? Wizardry? Magic isn't real." "Uncle Vernon says, your uncle," Professor McGonagall said, her lips thinning to a tight line, "is not always correct." She drew a slender wooden stick from her sleeve and with a gentle flick, conjured a steaming mug that she offered to Harry. "Hot chocolate. You're freezing." Harry accepted the mug with trembling hands, the warmth seeping into his frozen fingers. The first sip was heaven, rich and sweet and nothing like the watered-down version Aunt Petunia sometimes made for Dudley. "How do you know my name?" he asked, after several grateful sips had restored feeling to his lips. A complex emotion crossed Professor McGonagall's face. "That's a rather long story, Mr. Potter. One best told after we've found you some dry clothes and a proper meal." She studied him intently. "You've performed accidental magic, it seems. Quite remarkable accidental magic, to have operate through Hogwarts wards." "Magic?" Harry whispered, the word both forbidden and thrilling on his tongue. "I can do magic. You are a wizard, Mr. Potter. As were your parents before you." The mug nearly slipped from Harry's grasp. My parents? But they died in a car crash. Professor McGonagall's nostrils flared, and for a moment she looked truly fearsome. A car crash? Is that what those muggles told you? She visibly collected herself. No, Harry. Your parents did not die in a car crash. But that conversation should wait for the headmaster's presence. She waved her wand again, and Harry felt a pleasant warmth envelop him, steam rising from his now dry pajamas. Come, she said more gently. The Christmas feast will begin shortly. Most students have gone home for the holidays, but those who remain, along with the staff, will be gathering soon. Harry followed Professor McGonagall through corridors and up staircases that seemed to move beneath their feet. His mind whirled with questions, but something in the professor's manner, a mixture of kindness and authority, made him hold his tongue for now. They stopped before a stone gargoyle, which sprang aside when Professor McGonagall said, "Sugar Quill." Behind it, a spiral staircase rotated upward like an escalator. The headmaster's office, she explained, guiding Harry onto the moving stairs. Professor Dumbledore should be informed of your arrival immediately. The office they entered was unlike any room Harry had ever seen. Circular and filled with silver instruments that whirred and puffed smoke, it contained more books than Harry could count and portraits of elderly men and women who, like those in the corridors, moved and whispered. A magnificent red and gold bird the size of a swan perched beside an enormous desk. Behind the desk sat the most wizard-like person imaginable, an old man with flowing silver hair and beard, half-moon spectacles perched on a crooked nose, and robes spangled with stars. He looked up from a piece of parchment, his blue eyes widening momentarily before crinkling with what seemed like delighted surprise. "My word," he said softly. "Harry Potter, unless my eyes deceive me." "Headmaster," Professor McGonagall said urgently, "I found Mr. Potter wandering into the Great Hall, in his nightclothes. He claims to have been in his cupboard, at his relative's home one moment, and outside our gates the next. Accidental apparition through the Hogwarts wards." Dumbledore rose from his chair, studying Harry with keen interest. "Extraordinary. Indeed. And most concerning regarding his current guardianship arrangement," McGonagall added with barely concealed anger. Dumbledore nodded gravely. "We shall address that, Minerva, I assure you." He approached Harry and knelt to meet his eye level. "Hello, Harry. I am Professor Dumbledore. I knew your parents quite well." Harry's heart leapt. "You did? What were they like? Did they really do magic too?" "They were exceptional wizards, and even finer human beings," Dumbledore said gently. "Your mother, Lily, was brilliantly clever with a gift for charms and potions. Your father, James, was talented, daring, and fiercely loyal to those he loved." Tears pricked at Harry's eyes. No one had ever told him anything about his parents before. "Aunt Petunia never talks about my mum. She just says I'm a burden, like they were." Something flashed in Dumbledore's eyes, sorrow, perhaps, or regret. He straightened, wincing slightly as his knees creaked. "I believe explanations are in order, but first, comfort. Are you hungry, Harry?" As if on cue, Harry's stomach growled loudly. He blushed, but Dumbledore only chuckled. "Excellent timing. The Christmas Eve feast is about to begin. I suggest we find you more suitable attire and join the festivities. Tomorrow, we shall address how you came to be here and what must be done." With another wave of his wand, longer and more ornate than Professor McGonagall's, Dumbledore transformed Harry's pajamas into comfortable trousers, a jumper, and proper shoes. The clothes fit perfectly, unlike the hand-me-downs from Dudley that always hung off him like elephant skin. "Thank you, sir," Harry said, running his hands over the soft fabric in wonder. "You're most welcome, my boy. Now, shall we proceed to the feast? I find myself quite looking forward to the treacle tart." As they descended the spiral staircase, Harry felt as though he were floating. Less than an hour ago, he'd been locked in his cupboard, hungry and alone. Now he walked through a magical castle with people who spoke kindly to him and knew his parents. Whatever dream or madness this was, he desperately hoped it wouldn't end. The great hall had transformed in his absence. The 4 long tables now hosted perhaps 30 students total, most wearing casual clothes rather than the black robes he'd glimpsed in portraits. Evergreen garlands draped the walls, and 12 enormous Christmas trees decorated with golden bubbles and miniature stars lined the perimeter. Real fairy lights twinkled among the branches, and Harry realized with a start that they were actual tiny winged creatures glowing with colored light. Conversation died as the 3 of them entered. Students and staff alike stared openly at Harry, whispering behind their hands much like the portrait figures had done. "Students, staff," Dumbledore announced cheerfully, seeming not to notice the commotion, "we have an unexpected visitor this Christmas Eve. This young man will be joining our feast. I trust you will make him feel welcome." Harry felt his face burning as dozens of curious eyes tracked his movement toward the high table. Professor McGonagall conjured a chair for him between herself and a tiny man who introduced himself as Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher. "Remarkable resemblance to James," Flitwick squeaked, studying Harry with evident delight. "But those eyes, pure lily. Did you teach my parents too?" Harry asked eagerly. "Indeed I did. Your mother was one of my most gifted students. She had a particular talent for..." As Flitwick launched into stories about his mother's school achievements, platters of food appeared magically on the tables. Harry had never seen such a feast: roast turkeys, geese, and hams, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, tureens of buttered peas and carrots, boats of gravy and cranberry sauce, and silver platters of wizarding treats he couldn't identify. For the first time in his life, Harry was encouraged to eat his fill. Professor McGonagall kept adding portions to his plate, her expression darkening each time she noticed how he hesitated before taking anything, as though expecting permission. The conversation around him flowed with mentions of magic and places he'd never heard of: Diagon Alley, Hogsmeade, the Ministry of Magic. Students at the tables below kept sneaking glances at him. Harry caught fragments of their whispered conversations: "Harry Potter, can't believe he's here, the Scar, did you see, why do they keep looking at me?" he finally asked Professor McGonagall in a small voice. She exchanged a glance with Dumbledore before answering carefully. "You are, somewhat known in our world, Mr. Potter. The circumstances of your parents' passing were significant." Before Harry could ask what that meant, the massive doors of the great hall burst open. A giant of a man with a wild black beard and hair stood framed in the entrance, snow-dusting his moleskin overcoat. "Dumbledore, sir," he boomed, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "Just got back from the forest," and he stopped abruptly, his beetle-black eyes landing on Harry. "Bless my soul," he whispered, though his whisper was still clearly audible. Can it be?" "Hagrid," Dumbledore called pleasantly, "do join us." "Yes, young Harry has arrived somewhat ahead of schedule." The enormous man crossed the hall in a few giant strides, students scrambling to make way. Up close, Harry saw that despite his intimidating size, the man's eyes crinkled with kindness. "Harry," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Last time I saw ya was just a baby. Ya look so like your dad, but you've got your mum's eyes." "You knew them too?" Harry asked, hope rising in his chest. "Knew them? I was friends with them. Carried ya out of the ruins of your parents' house myself, the night they..." Hagrid's voice choked off, and he pulled a tablecloth-sized handkerchief from his pocket. "Sorry. Never got over it. What happened to Lily and James?" "Perhaps," Dumbledore interjected gently, "this conversation might continue after our feast. Hagrid, do join us." As Hagrid squeezed himself into a specially reinforced chair, Harry's mind raced. Ruins? What ruins? The more he learned, the less the story of a car crash made sense. The feast continued, and despite his burning questions, Harry found himself enjoying the magical atmosphere. Wizard crackers were nothing like the flimsy paper ones Aunt Petunia bought for Dudley, these exploded with the force of a small cannon, releasing gifts like wizard chess sets, live mice, and hats that made your ears disappear. By the time the desserts appeared, Christmas pudding, trifle, and the treacle tart Dumbledore had mentioned, Harry felt happier than he could ever remember feeling. The strangeness of his situation faded beneath the simple joy of being full, warm, and treated with kindness. As the feast wound down, students began drifting off to their dormitories. Harry, feeling contentment and exhaustion in equal measure, fought to keep his eyes open. "I believe," Dumbledore said, noting Harry's drooping eyelids, "it's time we found our young visitor suitable accommodations for the night. Tomorrow, we shall have much to discuss." "He can have a bed in Gryffindor Tower," Professor McGonagall offered. "There's only the Weasley twins and their brother remaining for the holiday." A fine suggestion. Though perhaps Harry might like to see a bit more of the castle first. "There's one room in particular I think might interest him." Curiosity overcame Harry's fatigue. "What room, sir?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "My dear boy, every wizard should visit the Hogwarts library at least once. It contains the answers to many questions, including, perhaps, how you came to be here tonight." The library was unlike any Harry had seen before, though his experience was limited to the small collection at his primary school. Towering shelves stretched toward vaulted ceilings, containing tens of thousands of books bound in leather, some chained to the shelves, others seemingly floating. "Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 years ago," Dumbledore explained as they walked between the stacks, "by four of the greatest witches and wizards of the age, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. They created this school to train young magical minds in safety and secrecy." "And I'll come here someday?" Harry asked hopefully. "To learn magic?" "Indeed. When you turn 11, your Hogwarts letter will arrive, inviting you to begin your magical education." "But why am I here now? I didn't mean to come." Dumbledore stroked his long beard thoughtfully. "Accidental magic often manifests in moments of great emotional distress. You wished very much to be elsewhere, I imagine." Harry nodded, thinking of the misery of his cupboard and the prospect of another bleak Christmas. "And not just elsewhere," Dumbledore continued, "but somewhere you belong. Magic responds to intent, Harry, and yours was particularly powerful. Few wizards could breach the protective enchantments around this school, yet somehow, you did." They had reached a section marked, "Hogwarts, a History." Dumbledore selected a massive tome from the shelf and laid it on a nearby table. The pages fell open as if by their own volition, revealing an illustration of four medieval-looking figures standing before the castle. "The founders," Dumbledore said, indicating the page. "Each valued different qualities in their students. Gryffindor prized courage and daring, Hufflepuff valued hard work and loyalty, Ravenclaw sought those of intelligence and wit, and Slytherin favored ambition and cunning. To this day, students are sorted into houses bearing their names." "How are they sorted?" Harry asked, fascinated by the moving illustration, which showed the founders greeting lines of children. "Ah, that's quite a tale." Dumbledore's eyes sparkled with amusement. "When the founders realized they wouldn't live forever, they enchanted Godric Gryffindor's hat to continue their work. The sorting hat sees into a student's mind and heart, determining where they best belong." "A hat decides?" Harry couldn't help laughing at the idea. "Indeed. And a most reliable judge of character it has proven to be." Dumbledore closed the book gently. "I believe that's enough history for tonight. Professor McGonagall will show you to Gryffindor Tower, where you can rest." But as they turned to leave, Harry noticed a doorway he hadn't seen before, a small arch that seemed to shimmer slightly, as though viewed through heat waves. "What's in there?" he asked, pointing. "Ah." Dumbledore hesitated. "That leads to the headmaster's collection, books too valuable or sensitive for general perusal." "Oh." Harry was about to turn away when a strange sensation came over him, a soft humming vibration that seemed to emanate from beyond the doorway. "I think, something's calling me." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. Calling you. Before Harry could explain the strange feeling, a translucent figure drifted through the nearest bookshelf, a ghost in the form of a regal-looking woman wearing an elaborate medieval dress and a diadem. "The lost one returns," she said in an ethereal voice, her gaze fixed on Harry. "The forgotten promise must be honored." "Lady Helena," Dumbledore addressed the ghost with a respectful nod. "What promise do you speak of?" "The covenant of 4 and 7, she replied cryptically. "The boy has the blood of both." Her silvery eyes never left Harry's face. "The Sorting Hat must judge before time. The goblins must be called." With those words, she drifted backward through another shelf and vanished. "Most curious," Dumbledore murmured. He studied Harry with renewed interest. "The Grey Lady rarely speaks to anyone, even staff." "What did she mean?" Harry asked, still staring at the spot where the ghost had disappeared. "I'm not entirely certain. The covenant of 4 and 7 is not a term I'm familiar with." Dumbledore stroked his beard. "However, her mention of the Sorting Hat is most intriguing." "Can I see it?" Harry blurted out, then blushed at his own boldness. "The Sorting Hat, I mean. Just to look at it." Dumbledore seemed to consider the request for a long moment. "I suppose there's no harm in a brief introduction. The hat resides in my office during the school year." They returned to the circular office, where the red and gold bird, which Dumbledore introduced as Fox, a phoenix, trilled a greeting. From a shelf behind the desk, Dumbledore retrieved a patched, frayed, and extremely dirty pointed wizard's hat. "This," he said with a flourish, "is the Sorting Hat." Harry stared at the ancient headwear with fascination. It looked thoroughly unimpressive, just a battered old hat that might have been tossed out by Aunt Petunia years ago. Yet he felt the same strange humming vibration emanating from it that he'd sensed near the restricted doorway in the library. "May I touch it?" he asked hesitantly. Dumbledore paused, then nodded. "You may hold it if you wish, though I suggest not putting it on. The sorting is traditionally reserved for the start of term feast." Harry carefully took the hat, surprised by how light it felt. The humming intensified as he turned it in his hands, examining the patches and frayed edges. Something about it felt familiar, as though he'd held it before. "What happens during the sorting?" he asked. "Students place the hat on their head, and it speaks to them, privately in their mind, usually, though it sometimes declares its decision aloud for all to hear. The hat considers one's qualities, desires, and potential before assigning a house." Harry's fingers tingled where they touched the ancient fabric. Almost without conscious thought, he lifted the hat toward his head. "Harry, I'm not sure that's," Dumbledore began, but too late. The moment the Sorting Hat touched Harry's unruly hair, a jolt like static electricity ran through his body. The hat seemed to expand, settling comfortably over his ears and eyes. A small voice spoke inside his head, "Well, well, well. What have we here?" "A Potter, but years too early." "Interesting, very interesting. You can talk to me?" Harry thought back, amazed. "Of course I can. I see all that's in your head, and more. You've come seeking belonging, haven't you? A place where you fit. But you've awakened something ancient in doing so, the covenant." "What covenant?" "The ghost mentioned it too. The promise made when goblin magic and wizard magic last worked together. When Gryffindor's gold and Ragnar's craft combined to create me." Before Harry could ask more questions, the hat's voice changed, becoming louder, no longer speaking just to him but proclaiming to the room, "Blood of Founders 4, Magic of Nations 7, the Covenant is remembered. I call the Makers to witness the return." A blinding flash of golden light erupted from the hat, shooting upward to the ceiling of the office and outward through the walls. Harry felt the hat growing hot on his head, though not painfully so. Wind that came from nowhere whipped through the room, sending papers flying and making Fox squawk in alarm. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, the light vanished. The hat cooled instantly and fell silent. "Most extraordinary," Dumbledore said quietly, retrieving his wand from his sleeve. "Harry, please remain very still." The air in the center of the office began to shimmer and distort. With a soft popping sound, 3 figures appeared where none had been before, but they weren't human. Standing roughly 4 feet tall with pointed ears, long fingers, and sharp, intelligent faces, the newcomers wore ornate armor and carried weapons that gleamed with a silvery light. Goblins, Harry realized, recognizing them from fairy tales Dudley had discarded. The goblin in the center stepped forward, dark eyes flashing dangerously as they took in the scene. When his gaze fell on Harry, still wearing the sorting hat, he inhaled sharply. "The summoning hat," he said in a gravelly voice. "After all these centuries, it calls." "Greetings, Master Ragnarok," Dumbledore said with perfect composure, as though magical beings regularly appeared in his office. "This is unexpected." "Albus Dumbledore." The goblin inclined his head slightly. "The hat has invoked the ancient covenant. We answer its call, as bound by oath and magic." His penetrating gaze returned to Harry. "Who is the child that wears the Seven Makers' creation?" Before Dumbledore could answer, the hat spoke again, its voice echoing through the office. "Harry James Potter, blood of Gryffindor through paternal line, blood of goblin friend Hufflepuff through maternal connection. The twice-marked one who bridges worlds." A stunned silence followed this pronouncement. Harry felt rooted to the spot, the hat suddenly heavy on his head. "I'm related to Gryffindor," he finally whispered. "And Hufflepuff?" "Indeed," the hat replied, now speaking normally. "Though many generations removed. The Potter line descends from Godric's second son, while your mother's family traces back to Helga's daughter who married a Muggle craftsman. Deluded, but present, and recognized by goblin magic." The goblin named Ragnarok approached Harry, moving with surprising grace for one so stocky. "Remove the hat, young heir," he commanded. "Let me look upon you." With trembling fingers, Harry lifted the sorting hat and set it carefully on Dumbledore's desk. The goblin studied him intently, from his lightning scar to his hand-me-down shoes. "The mark of survival," Ragnarok murmured, eyes lingering on Harry's forehead. "And the mark of the covenant." He pointed to Harry's right hand, where a small, silvery mark like a crescent moon had appeared on his palm, a mark that hadn't been there before he put on the hat. "What's happening?" Harry asked, looking frantically between Dumbledore and the goblins. "What's this covenant everyone keeps mentioning?" Ragnarok exchanged a glance with his companions before answering. "When Hogwarts was founded, goblin magic helped create its deepest protections. The 4 founders and 7 goblin clans swore that should their bloodlines ever combine in one who needed sanctuary, both nations would honor the ancient bonds of protection. But such a convergence was thought impossible," one of the other goblins added, speaking for the first time. "Wizards and goblins haven't intermarried in over 6 centuries. "Not intermarriage," the sorting hat interjected from its place on the desk. "But Helga Hufflepuff's daughter married a man whose grandmother was goblin-born. The bloodline thinned but never vanished, passing eventually to the Evans family. My mother was descended from goblins." Harry couldn't wrap his head around this revelation. Very distantly, Ragnarok said with a hint of what might have been amusement. "But goblin magic recognizes its own, across generations." He turned to Dumbledore. "The covenant has been invoked. The boy requires sanctuary. By ancient law, both Hogwarts and Gringotts must provide it." "Harry already has guardians," Dumbledore began carefully. "His mother's sister and her husband, who locked him in a cupboard and starved him." Professor McGonagall interrupted sharply from the doorway, where she had apparently been watching the scene unfold. "Who told him his parents died in a car crash and that magic doesn't exist?" Dumbledore winced. "The blood protection is clearly insufficient," Ragnarok cut in. "The child invoked ancient magic to escape, breaking through wards that should have been impenetrable to one his age. The covenant supersedes wizard guardianship laws, Dumbledore. You know this." A tense silence filled the office. Harry looked between the adults, sensing currents of conflict he didn't fully understand. Perhaps, Dumbledore finally said, we might continue this discussion in the morning. It's growing late, and Harry has had quite an eventful day. Ragnock nodded curtly. We will remain at Hogwarts tonight. The summit room should still exist, if wizards have honored that part of the covenant. It does, Dumbledore confirmed. Though it hasn't been used in many generations. The house elves will prepare it for your delegation. House elves? Harry whispered to Professor McGonagall. Magical servants who maintain the castle, she explained quietly. You'll meet them soon enough. Ragnock approached Harry once more. Sleep well, young heir. Tomorrow we shall speak of your heritage and what it means for both our peoples. He reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew a small, golden token, which he pressed into Harry's palm. Keep this close. It marks you as a friend of the Goblin nation. The token was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse slightly against Harry's skin. He closed his fingers around it, feeling strangely comforted by its presence. Thank you, he said sincerely. I don't understand everything that's happening, but I'm glad to meet you. Something like approval flickered in Ragnock's dark eyes. With a bow that Harry hastily returned, the Goblin leader rejoined his companions. Together, they followed a small, bat-eared creature that had appeared in the doorway, a house elf, Harry presumed, out of the office. Left with only Dumbledore and McGonagall, Harry suddenly felt the full weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. The events of the day swirled in his mind like the snowflakes outside the castle windows. I believe, Professor McGonagall said gently, that Mr. Potter has experienced quite enough revelations for one evening. Shall we show him to Gryffindor Tower, Albus? A wise suggestion, Minerva. Dumbledore smiled at Harry, though there was something troubled behind his twinkling eyes. Rest well, Harry. I suspect tomorrow will bring many answers, and perhaps a few more questions as well. As Harry followed Professor McGonagall from the office, the Sorting Hat called after him in a voice only he seemed to hear, the Covenant awakens, young Potter. The world changes tonight. For the first time in his life, Harry fell asleep in a proper bed, warm and full and surrounded by magic. Whatever tomorrow might bring, he knew with bone-deep certainty that he would never return to the cupboard under the stairs. The Covenant, whatever it truly meant, had seen to that. As snow fell silently beyond the tower windows and the castle settled into the stillness of Christmas Eve, Harry dreamed of goblins and founders, of ancient promises and new beginnings. The small golden token Ragnock had given him glowed softly in his palm, pulsing in time with his heartbeat like a tiny star fallen to earth. In his dream, his parents stood beside him, his mother's eyes as green as his own, his father's hair as wild. They were smiling, proud. Behind them stretched two lines of figures, wizards on one side, goblins on the other, reaching back through time to the founding of Hogwarts itself. The bridge between worlds, they whispered as one. The Covenant Keeper. Harry slept on, unaware that far below in the depths of the castle, goblins and wizards were already debating his future, and that by morning, the entire wizarding world would know that Harry Potter had come to Hogwarts 3 years early, summoning the Goblin nation and awakening magic that had slumbered for a millennium. Chapter 2, Ancient Bonds and Broken Promises. Harry woke to sunlight streaming through crimson curtains. For a disorienting moment, he thought he must be dreaming. The bed beneath him was impossibly soft, the blankets warm and heavy. His cupboard had never felt like this. Then the events of the previous day crashed back into his memory. The accidental magic. The castle. Dumbledore and McGonagall. The Sorting Hat and the goblins. He sat up, reaching instinctively for his glasses on the bedside table. As he put them on, his surroundings came into focus, a circular dormitory with 5 four-poster beds, though only one other showed signs of occupancy. The walls were decorated with moving posters of people flying on broomsticks, and a large banner depicting a golden lion on a red background hung between 2 windows. Gryffindor, Harry whispered, remembering what the hat had told him. Blood of Gryffindor through the paternal line. He uncurled his right hand, where the crescent moon mark still shimmered on his palm. Beside it lay the golden token Ragnar had given him, somehow still clutched in his hand despite his sleep. In the morning light, he could see it was a coin of sorts, stamped with symbols he didn't recognize and a single word in English, friend. The dormitory door burst open, making Harry jump. A tall, thin boy with flaming red hair and a smattering of freckles across his nose stared at him with undisguised curiosity. "Blimey, it's true," the boy exclaimed. "Fred and George said Harry Potter was sleeping in our dorm, but I reckoned they were having me on." Harry blinked at him. Hello. I'm Ron. Ron Weasley." The redhead approached cautiously, as though Harry might vanish if he moved too quickly. "Is it really you? Do you really have the, you know?" He gestured vaguely toward his own forehead. Self-consciously, Harry pushed back his fringe to reveal the lightning-shaped scar. "Wicked," Ron breathed. "So it's all true. You just appeared at Hogwarts yesterday? And summoned a goblin army?" "Not an army," Harry corrected, sliding out of bed. "Just 3 of them. Their leader's named Ragnar." Ron's eyes widened even further. "Ragnar? The director of Gringotts? Bloody hell, Harry. What's Gringotts?" "The Wizard Bank. Dad says Ragnar's the most powerful goblin in Britain. No one ever sees him, he doesn't deal with regular customers." Ron shook his head in amazement. "The whole castle's talking about it. Professor McGonagall told my brothers and me not to bother you, but I had to see for myself." Harry liked Ron's straightforward manner. After years of Dudley's bullying and the Dursleys' disdain, it was refreshing to meet someone his own age who seemed genuinely friendly. "I don't mind," he assured Ron. "Actually, I have loads of questions. Everything's happening so fast, and everyone seems to know more about me than I do." Ron's expression shifted to disbelief. "You don't know? About you-know-who and how you survived? About being the boy who lived?" Before Harry could reply, 2 identical red-headed boys burst into the dormitory. "Ickle Ronnikins playing journalist?" one asked with a mischievous grin. "Tut-tut, didn't McGonagall say to leave the poor boy alone?" The other added, though his eyes danced with the same merry light. "I wasn't bothering him," Ron protested. "We were just talking." "Fred and George Weasley," the first twin said, extending his hand to Harry. "Beaters extraordinaire, pranksters supreme, and your humble tour guides, should you wish to explore this fine castle," the second twin finished. Harry shook hands with both, feeling slightly dazed by their rapid-fire speech. "Nice to meet you." "The pleasure's ours," they chorused. A soft pop announced the arrival of a house elf, the same bat-eared creature Harry had glimpsed the previous night. It bowed low, its pencil-thin nose nearly touching the floor. "Headmaster Dumbledore requests young Master Potter's presence in the Great Hall for breakfast," it squeaked. "The Goblin delegation awaits, and the Ministry representatives have arrived." "Ministry representatives?" Fred, or was it George, repeated with raised eyebrows. "Indeed, Master Weasley. Minister Fudge himself and several others." The elf turned back to Harry. "Fresh clothes have been provided." It pointed to a neatly folded stack on a nearby chair. "Shall Nippy wait to escort young Master?" Yes, please," Harry said, still unused to being addressed so formally. "I'll just change quickly." The Weasleys excused themselves, though Ron promised to see Harry at breakfast. Left alone with the patiently waiting house elf, Harry changed into the provided clothes, a simple but well-made set of black trousers, a white button-up shirt, and a worn jumper in deep green that matched his eyes perfectly. "Did Professor McGonagall conjure these?" he asked Nippy as they descended the spiral staircase from the dormitory. "Oh no, young master. The castle provided them." At Harry's confused look, Nippy elaborated, "Hogwarts responds to need, especially for those it recognizes as heirs. The room of necessary things produced clothing in young master's size when Nippy requested it." "The castle is alive?" Harry asked, fascinated by the concept. In its way, yes. Not alive like wizards or elves, but aware. Sentient. Nippy led him through corridors that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves. Hogwarts was built with goblin magic in its foundations and wizard magic in its walls. Both together make it special. They passed moving portraits that called greetings to Harry, suits of armor that saluted, and ghosts that bowed respectfully. By the time they reached the entrance to the Great Hall, Harry felt as though he'd walked through a living history book. The Founder's heirs are rare, Nippy said quietly as they paused before the massive doors. Young Master is the first in many generations to be acknowledged by both wizard and goblin magic. Nippy is honored to serve. With another low bow, the elf pushed open the doors. The scene inside made Harry falter mid-step. The house tables had been rearranged into a large U-shape. At the head table sat Dumbledore, flanked by Professors McGonagall and Flitwick, along with several adults Harry didn't recognize, some in colorful robes, others in more formal black attire with silver fastenings. Ragnock and his two companions occupied seats of honor, elevated on cushions to match the height of the wizards. But what truly made Harry pause was the abrupt silence that fell as he entered. Every head turned, every eye fixed upon him. Whispers broke out immediately, so small for his age, the scar, just as they said, mark of the covenant on his hand. Dumbledore rose, his presence somehow commanding silence once more. "Ah, Harry. Good morning. Please, join us." He gestured to an empty seat between Ragnock and a plump, little wizard wearing a lime-green bowler hat. Harry walked forward on legs that felt like jelly, acutely aware of the scrutiny from all sides. As he approached the table, Ragnock inclined his head in greeting. "Herr Potter," the goblin said formally. "I trust you slept well." "Yes, thank you," Harry replied, trying to match the goblin's dignified tone despite his nervousness. He slipped into the indicated chair, noticing that it, too, had been raised slightly to put him at a comfortable height. "Harry, my dear boy." The wizard in the bowler hat clapped him on the shoulder with forced joviality. "Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic. Extraordinary circumstances, quite extraordinary. When Dumbledore sent word that you'd appeared at Hogwarts, summoning the Goblin delegation, no less, well, I simply had to come see for myself." "Minister," Dumbledore intervened smoothly, "perhaps we might allow Harry to have breakfast before beginning our discussions. He's had quite the eventful introduction to our world." Fudge withdrew his hand reluctantly. Yes, of course. Plenty of time for explanations." Plates of food appeared before them, eggs, bacon, sausages, toast, porridge, and fruits arranged in colorful displays. Harry, hungry despite his nerves, helped himself to a bit of everything within reach. He noticed that the Goblin delegation had their own distinct platters, raw fish, what looked like strips of red meat, and dark bread studded with seeds and nuts. As they ate, Harry observed the adults around him. Minister Fudge seemed nervous, repeatedly dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief and casting sidelong glances at Ragnock. A severe-looking witch with a monocle sat beside him, her expression inscrutable as she studied Harry over the rim of her goblet. On Dumbledore's other side sat a tall, thin wizard with long silver blonde hair and cold grey eyes that narrowed whenever they fell on Harry. At the regular tables, students watched the proceedings with undisguised interest. Harry spotted Ron and his brothers among the handful of Gryffindors, all giving him encouraging thumbs up when they caught his eye. "Now then," Fudge said once most plates had been cleared, "about this most unusual situation." "Indeed, Minister," the blonde wizard interrupted silkily. "The question of how an underage wizard breached Hogwarts security is certainly pressing. The Board of Governors has serious concerns." "Lucius," Dumbledore acknowledged the man calmly. "I'm pleased you could join us as a representative of the board. However, I believe we should first address the matter of the covenant, which takes precedence even over the board's authority in this instance." Lucius's nostrils flared slightly. "The so-called Covenant of 4 and 7 is mythological at best, Dumbledore. There is no credible historical evidence. Wizard Malfoy speaks falsely, Ragnar cut in, his gravelly voice carrying a dangerous edge. The covenant is well documented in Goblin records. That wizards chose to forget their promises does not negate their binding power. An uncomfortable silence fell. Harry glanced between the adults, sensing the undercurrents of tension. Perhaps, Professor McGonagall suggested, we might all benefit from a clear explanation of what this covenant entails, particularly for Mr. Potter's benefit. All eyes turned to Harry once more. He straightened in his seat, determined not to appear as intimidated as he felt. I would like to know, he said quietly but firmly. The Sorting Hat said I had the blood of Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, and something about being Goblin friend. What does it all mean? Dumbledore nodded approvingly. A reasonable request. Master Ragnar, as your nation has preserved this history most faithfully, would you do us the honor of explaining? Ragnar's dark eyes gleamed. He withdrew from his robes a small golden object that expanded in his hands, revealing itself as a miniature model of Hogwarts castle, crafted with astonishing detail. 1,000 years ago, Ragnar began, his voice taking on a rhythmic, storytelling cadence. When the four great wizards sought to build a school of magic, they faced a challenge. The land they had chosen, this very ground beneath us, was ancient and saturated with wild magic that resisted their attempts to shape it. The model in his hands began to glow softly, projecting ghostly images above the table, for figures in medieval dress standing before an untamed wilderness. Godric Gryffindor, who had fought alongside goblin warriors against the giant clans of the north, proposed an alliance. He sought the aid of the 7 clans of the Goblin nation, whose magic of earth and stone had no equal. The projection shifted, showing the 4 founders meeting with a delegation of goblins in formal attire. My ancestor, Ragnar I, was skeptical. Relations between our peoples had never been stable. But Helga Hufflepuff, whose grandmother's sister had married into the Silverblade clan, spoke for the wizards. She offered what no wizard had before, genuine partnership. Not merely employing goblin craftsmen, but combining our magics as equals. The images showed wizards and goblins working together, raising stone walls with their magic intertwined, gold from wizard wands, silver from goblin hands. For 7 years, the goblin clans and the 4 founders worked as one. Together, they created wonders, the moving staircases, the enchanted ceiling of this very hall, the room of requirement, and the deepest protections of Hogwarts. Ragnar's gaze swept around the table. And when their work was complete, they forged a covenant. The projection now showed the founders and goblin leaders gathered around a stone table, hands clasped as golden light swirled around them. Should ever a child be born with the blood of both founders and goblin clans, that child would be recognized as a bridge between our worlds. A covenant keeper with the right to sanctuary from both peoples, and the authority to call upon ancient bonds if either side failed in their obligations. The model castle closed in on itself, becoming once more a small golden object in Ragnar's palm. He fixed his gaze on Harry. The founders feared that future generations might forget the alliance that built Hogwarts. As indeed, they have. His sharp glance toward Lucius Malfoy left no doubt about whom he considered most guilty of such forgetting. So they created a failsafe within the Sorting Hat, Gryffindor's own hat, enhanced by goblin magic to recognize the bloodlines of all founders and clans. And you're saying Potter has activated this failsafe? The witch with the monocle asked, speaking for the first time. See for yourself, Madam Bones. Ragnar gestured to Harry's right hand. The mark of the covenant. Harry held up his palm, where the silver crescent still gleamed. Professor Flitwick leaned forward with evident fascination. Remarkable. I've only read about such marks in the oldest texts. It's said to be impossible to forge or replicate, a direct manifestation of ancient magic. It is, Ragnar confirmed. And it proves beyond doubt that Harry Potter is the covenant keeper prophesied a millennium ago. Minister Fudge tugged nervously at his collar. Yes, well, very interesting history lesson. But surely this doesn't override current wizarding law. The boy has legal guardians, muggles, yes, but appointed according to his parents' wishes. That is incorrect, Minister, McGonagall said sharply. Lily and James Potter never specified that Harry should go to Petunia Dursley. That decision was made after their deaths, and not by the wizards named in their will as potential guardians. Harry's head snapped up. My parents had a will. An uncomfortable silence fell. Dumbledore cleared his throat gently. Yes, Harry. However, circumstances at the time of their deaths were complex. With Sirius Black's imprisonment and the danger still posed by Voldemort's followers, several people around the table flinched at the name. Fudge nearly upset his tea. It was deemed safest to place you with your mother's blood relatives, Dumbledore continued. The protection your mother bestowed upon you through her sacrifice created powerful wards that could be maintained through that blood connection. Wards that failed spectacularly yesterday, Ragnock pointed out. When an 8-year-old wizard operate through them and through Hogwarts' own protections, a feat that should be impossible for even the most powerful adult. The Covenant recognized his need, the second goblin in the delegation spoke up. It overrode all barriers to bring him to Sanctuary. Harry tried to process all this information. So, my aunt and uncle weren't supposed to raise me? No, Mr. Potter, they were not, McGonagall said firmly. And based on what I've observed of their treatment of you, they never should have been given that responsibility. The question now, Madam Bones interjected, is what happens next. The Covenant may be magically binding, but we still operate within a legal framework. We cannot simply remove a child from his guardians without due process. The Covenant supersedes ministry law, Ragnock stated flatly. By the oldest treaties between our nations, which even the ministry must honor. Treaties that are subject to interpretation, Lucius Malfoy drawled. I find it suspicious that these alleged Covenant claims emerge now, just when the Potter heir approaches the age when he might take a greater interest in his substantial inheritance. A tense silence fell. Harry looked between Malfoy and Ragnock, sensing danger in the charged atmosphere. What inheritance? He asked, unable to contain his curiosity. I don't have anything except what the Dursleys give me. Malfoy's lip curled in what might have been amusement or disdain. My. The boy who lived, unaware of his status as heir to one of Britain's oldest wizarding fortunes. How convenient for those managing his affairs. Lucius, Dumbledore warned, this is neither the time nor the place. I disagree, Headmaster, Ragnock interrupted. The Covenant Keeper should know his birthright. He turned to Harry. The Potter family vault is among the oldest at Gringotts. Your father's family descended not only from Godric Gryffindor but from generations of notable wizards who amassed considerable wealth. As their last living heir, it belongs to you. Harry felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath him. All his life, he'd worn Dudley's cast-offs and been told he was a burden on his relatives' generosity. And all that time, he'd had a vault of his own. Why didn't anyone tell me? He asked, unable to keep a note of accusation from his voice. You are a minor, Fudge blustered. Such matters are typically handled by guardians until a wizard reaches his majority at 17. Unless, Ragnock said with a predatory smile that showed sharp teeth, the heir is recognized as Covenant Keeper. Then, by ancient law, he comes under the joint protection and guidance of Hogwarts and Gringotts, with access to his heritage when deemed appropriate by his magical guardians, meaning us. He gestured between himself and Dumbledore. This is unprecedented, Madam Bones stated, though she seemed more intrigued than opposed. The implications for wizarding custodial law are enormous. Perhaps, suggested a new voice from further down the table, we might consider a compromise. The speaker was a shabby-looking wizard with prematurely graying hair and several scars across his face. Despite his worn appearance, his amber eyes held a sharp intelligence that reminded Harry somehow of Professor McGonagall. Remus, Dumbledore nodded, please continue. The Covenant clearly provides magical sanctuary and protection for Harry. That much is undeniable, given the mark he bears. Remus gestured to Harry's palm. But rather than appending the entire legal system, could we not establish a form of shared guardianship? The Dursleys would retain nominal Muggle custody, satisfying ministry requirements, while Hogwarts and Gringotts would oversee Harry's magical education and heritage. An elegant solution, Dumbledore mused, though it would require Harry to return to Privet Drive. No. Harry hadn't meant to speak so forcefully, but the thought of going back to the cupboard under the stairs filled him with dread. I don't want to go back there. They hate magic, they hate me, and they lied about my parents. Mr. Potter, Madame Bones said gently, while I sympathize, children cannot simply choose to leave their guardians. There are procedures, actually, interrupted the third goblin, who had remained silent until now. He can. Under Covenant law, if the heir invokes sanctuary and presents evidence of mistreatment by current guardians, alternative arrangements must be made immediately. What sort of evidence? Malfoy asked silkily. The goblin turned to Harry. May I? He asked, holding out a gnarled hand. Not entirely sure what was being requested, but trusting the goblin's intent, Harry nodded. The goblin closed his eyes and placed his palm against Harry's forehead, just below the lightning scar. A soft silver glow emanated from the point of contact, and Harry felt a curious sensation, as though someone were gently flipping through the pages of a book inside his mind. After a moment, the goblin withdrew his hand and turned to the assembled adults with a fierce expression. The evidence is clear. Neglect. Malnourishment. Confinement in a cupboard. Punishment for accidental magic. Deliberate withholding of knowledge regarding his heritage. His dark eyes flashed dangerously. By both wizard and goblin standards, these constitute abuse. Shocked murmurs ran around the table. McGonagall's lips had thinned to a barely visible line, and even Snape, who had been watching the proceedings with apparent disinterest, seemed disturbed. The memories cannot lie, Ragnarok stated firmly. The Covenant stands activated. Harry Potter will not return to those muggles. Then where is he to go? Fudge demanded. Hogwarts is a school, not an orphanage. I could take him, Remus offered quietly. I was friends with James and Lily. They named me as a potential guardian in their will. Out of the question, snapped a thin wizard Harry hadn't noticed before. Ministry regulations are quite clear regarding your condition, Lupin. Remus flinched slightly but didn't argue. Harry wondered what condition could possibly disqualify someone from caring for him. If I may, said Professor Flitwick, Hogwarts has historically provided sanctuary to those in need. The Founders' quarters remain intact, though unused for centuries. As an heir of Gryffindor, Harry has the right to reside in Godric's quarters. Under whose supervision? Madame Bones asked practically. Mine, McGonagall said firmly. As head of Gryffindor House, it would be appropriate for me to oversee Harry's welfare within the castle. And Gringotts will assign a guardian for financial and heritage matters, Ragnarok added. My son, Griphook, will serve in this capacity. One of the two goblins accompanying Ragnarok inclined his head. Harry recognized him as the younger of the pair, with keen eyes and a slightly less weathered face than the others. Is no one concerned, Lucius Malfoy interjected, about the educational disruption this will cause? Hogwarts is not equipped to teach an 8-year-old. Actually, Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, Hogwarts was originally founded to teach magical children of all ages. The restriction to 11 and above came much later, during the International Statute of Secrecy negotiations. The castle itself can provide appropriate instruction. Harry, who had been following the rapid-fire discussion with growing bewilderment, finally spoke up. Don't I get any say in this? The adults fell silent, many looking somewhat abashed at having discussed his future without consulting him. Of course you do, Harry, Dumbledore said kindly. What would you prefer? Harry took a deep breath. I want to stay here. I want to learn about magic and my parents and this Covenant thing. And I don't ever want to go back to the Dursleys. His words hung in the air for a moment. Then Ragnarok nodded decisively. So be it. By right of covenant, Harry Potter claims sanctuary at Hogwarts with joint guardianship shared between wizards and goblins. He turned to Fudge. Minister, will the ministry honor the ancient treaties, or must we consider them broken? It was a clear challenge, and everyone at the table recognized it as such. Fudge paled slightly. Now, no need for such dramatic ultimatums, he said hastily. The ministry certainly honors its treaties. But there are procedures, paperwork, which can be handled by my department, Madam Bones intervened smoothly. As Director of Magical Law Enforcement, I can authorize emergency custody arrangements pending formal review. Given the evidence presented and the unique magical circumstances, I see no reason to deny the Covenant's provisions. She fixed her monocled gaze on Harry. Provided Mr. Potter is in agreement. I am, Harry said firmly. Then it's settled, Ragnock declared, satisfaction evident in his gravelly voice. The Covenant is honored. Harry Potter will reside at Hogwarts under the joint protection of the school and Gringotts Bank, with Minerva McGonagall and Griphook serving as his primary guardians. Lucius Malfoy's expression had soured, but he offered no further objection. Minister Fudge looked relieved that a decision had been reached without requiring his direct intervention. Splendid, Dumbledore said, clapping his hands together. Now that the matter of Harry's guardianship is resolved, perhaps we might address the other significant aspect of yesterday's events, the reactivation of the Covenant of 4 and 7 itself. What exactly does that mean? Harry asked. Besides where I live, I mean. Ragnock exchanged a glance with Dumbledore before responding. The Covenant was more than a provision for potential heirs, young Harry. It was a formal alliance between wizards and goblins, one that has been dormant for centuries as relations between our peoples deteriorated. There have been rebellions, Griphook added, speaking directly to Harry. Wars fought between goblins and wizards over broken promises and mutual distrust. The Covenant's activation creates an opportunity, Dumbledore explained, to revisit that ancient alliance. To heal old wounds and forge new connections between our communities. Harry looked around the table, suddenly understanding the tension he'd sensed since entering. You want me to help with that? But I don't know anything about being a wizard yet, let alone goblin stuff. Which is precisely why you are ideal, Ragnock said. You come to both worlds without preconceptions or prejudice. You can learn our ways and wizard ways simultaneously, becoming a true bridge between us. It's a significant responsibility, McGonagall cautioned, giving Ragnock a sharp look. One that an 8-year-old should not have to bear alone. He won't be alone, Remus spoke up. If I can't be his guardian, I can at least offer my assistance. With the headmaster's permission, I could serve as a tutor, helping Harry understand both his wizarding heritage and the responsibilities of the Covenant. Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. An excellent suggestion, Remus. Your knowledge of history and defense would be invaluable. And Gringotts will provide instruction in goblin culture, language, and magic, Griphook added. As is the right of an acknowledged friend of the nation. Harry's head was spinning with all these plans being made around him. Part of him was thrilled at the prospect of staying at Hogwarts and learning magic, another part was overwhelmed by the weight of expectations already being placed on his small shoulders. I'll do my best, he said finally, but I don't know if I'll be any good at being a Covenant keeper. Ragnock's expression softened slightly. We do not expect perfection, young heir. Only openness and honest effort. The rest will come with time and teaching. The discussion continued for another hour, with various officials raising questions and concerns about the practical implementation of Harry's unusual status. Throughout it all, Harry noticed that both McGonagall and Griphook frequently intervened when the demands on him seemed to become excessive, advocating for his well-being over political considerations. By the time the meeting concluded, a basic framework had been established. Harry would live in the refurbished Gryffindor Founders' Quarters, with a connecting office for Professor McGonagall to maintain appropriate supervision. His education would be split between wizard tutors for traditional subjects and goblin instructors for their magic and culture. During holidays and weekends, he would have opportunities to visit Gringotts to learn about his financial inheritance and goblin traditions. Most importantly to Harry, he would never have to return to Privet Drive. As the various officials filed out of the great hall, many pausing to shake Harry's hand or study his covenant mark with curiosity, Dumbledore approached with Remus Lupin at his side. "Harry," the headmaster said gently, "this has been rather a whirlwind introduction to our world. How are you feeling about everything?" Harry considered the question seriously. "Confused," he admitted. "Happy to be here instead of with the Dursleys. Scared I won't be good enough at all this covenant stuff. And..." He hesitated, then decided honesty was best, angry that nobody told me about my parents or being a wizard or having money in a vault somewhere. Dumbledore's expression grew solemn. "You have every right to those feelings, especially the anger. Mistakes were made in how your guardianship was handled, mistakes for which I bear significant responsibility." "You do?" Harry hadn't expected such a frank admission. "I was the one who placed you with the Dursleys," Dumbledore explained. "Believing that your mother's blood protection was the surest shield against Voldemort's remaining followers. I knew they were not ideal guardians, but I underestimated how poorly they would treat you." He sighed heavily. "For that, Harry, I am truly sorry." The simple apology took Harry by surprise. Uncle Vernon had never apologized for anything, and Aunt Petunia certainly never acknowledged when she'd been unfair. "It's okay," he said awkwardly. "I'm here now." "You are indeed." Dumbledore's eyes regained some of their twinkle. "And I believe Remus has something that might help you feel more connected to your parents." Lupin stepped forward, holding a leather-bound photo album. "This isn't much, Harry, but it's a start. Photos of your parents during their time at Hogwarts and after. I've been collecting them since they were gone." Harry accepted the album with trembling hands, opening it to find his parents waving at him from the very first page, his father with untidy black hair so like his own, his mother with the same green eyes everyone kept mentioning. "They're moving," he whispered in awe. "Wizard photographs do that," Remus explained with a sad smile. These were taken during their 7th year. James had just been named head boy, much to everyone's shock. Your mother was head girl, which surprised no one at all. Harry traced his finger over the image of his parents, who beamed at him and at each other with evident love. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is the best gift I've ever had." While the adults continued discussing arrangements, Harry was finally allowed to join the Weasleys for a proper breakfast. Ron, Fred, and George bombarded him with questions about the meeting, which Harry answered as best he could while still processing everything himself. "So you're staying at Hogwarts?" Ron asked, eyes wide with envy. "And learning magic early? That's brilliant." "I guess so," Harry agreed, still feeling somewhat dazed by it all. "Professor McGonagall's going to be sort of my guardian while I'm here." "Rather you than us, mate," Fred, or George, said with a dramatic shudder. "She's strict as they come." "But fair," the other twin added. "Never punishes without reason." "And the goblins?" Ron asked, lowering his voice and glancing toward where Ragnock and his delegation were now conversing with Flitwick. "What are they like?" "Dad says they're dead clever but dangerous to cross." "They seem intense," Harry admitted. "But Griphook's going to teach me about goblin stuff. He's younger than the others, I think." "Blimey." Ron shook his head in amazement. "Wait till I tell Dad. He works at the Ministry, in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office. He'll go mental over all this covenant business." After breakfast, while the adults continued their discussions, Fred and George offered to give Harry a proper tour of the castle. With permission from McGonagall, who eyed the twins suspiciously but relented when they promised to keep Harry safe, the 4 boys set off to explore. Hogwarts was even more remarkable by daylight. Moving staircases connected the various floors, portraits called greetings as they passed, and ghost students drifted through walls without warning. The twins seemed to know every secret passage and hidden doorway, leading Harry through shortcuts that sometimes required tapping specific stones or tickling painted fruits. The key to Hogwarts, Fred explained as they emerged from behind a tapestry onto the third floor, is understanding it's not just a building. It's alive, in its way. Nippy, the house elf, said something similar, Harry recalled. About the castle being sentient. Smart elf, that Nippy, George nodded approvingly. Most people forget the magic here isn't just spells and enchantments. It's alive, growing, changing. Like how the room of necessary things made clothes for me. The twins stopped abruptly, exchanging meaningful looks. The room of necessary things. Fred repeated. You've seen it? Well, no, Harry admitted. Nippy just mentioned it. That, George said with reverence, is the stuff of legend. We've been searching for it since our first year. Supposedly, Fred explained, it becomes whatever the seeker needs most. But it only appears to those in genuine need. And in 3 years of mischief-making, George sighed, apparently we've never needed anything quite desperately enough. They continued the tour, showing Harry the Quidditch pitch, explaining the wizarding sport with such enthusiasm that Harry couldn't help but be intrigued, the greenhouses, and finally the shore of the Great Lake, where the giant squid was basking in the winter sunlight. This is brilliant, Harry said, watching the squid lazily wave a tentacle. The Dursleys never took me anywhere interesting. Speaking of, Ron said hesitantly, is it true what they're saying? That they made you sleep in a cupboard? Harry's smile faded. He'd almost forgotten that the goblin had extracted that memory during the meeting. Yeah. The cupboard under the stairs was my bedroom. The Weasleys exchanged dark looks. That's horrible, Harry, Fred said, uncharacteristically serious. No wonder the Covenant magic activated, George added. Bringing you here, where you belong. A shout from the castle interrupted their conversation. Looking up, they saw Griphook standing at the entrance, gesturing for Harry to return. Looks like goblin lessons start now, Ron observed. Good luck, mate. Will you still be here later? Harry asked, suddenly reluctant to leave his new friends. We're staying through New Year's, Fred confirmed. Plenty of time for more exploring. Heartened by this, Harry jogged back to the castle, where Griphook awaited with an expression of barely concealed impatience. Your first lesson in goblin culture, the young goblin said without preamble, punctuality is valued above almost all else. Sorry, Harry apologized. The castle's so big, I lost track of time. Griphook's stern expression softened slightly. Understandable, for your first day. Come, your quarters have been prepared, and we have much to discuss before this evening's ceremony. Ceremony? Harry followed Griphook through the entrance hall and up a staircase he hadn't used before. What ceremony? The formal acknowledgement of the Covenant's activation, Griphook explained. Representatives from all 7 goblin clans are arriving as we speak. The ceremony will bind wizard and goblin magic to the Covenant once more, with you as its focal point. Harry's stomach tightened with anxiety. What will I have to do? Very little, actually. Mainly stand where instructed and repeat a few phrases in gobbledygook, our language. Seeing Harry's apprehension, Griphook added, I will teach you the words and their proper pronunciation. It is not complex. They had reached a corridor on the 3rd floor that Harry hadn't seen during the twins' tour. Here, the stone walls were decorated with tapestries depicting lions and intricate geometric patterns in red and gold. At the end of the corridor hung a portrait of a bearded wizard who bore a striking resemblance to Harry, the same unruly black hair and strong jawline, though his eyes were a warm brown rather than green. The portrait studied Harry with evident interest as they approached. So, it said in a deep, resonant voice, this is my descendant. A bit small, but there's potential there. Godric Gryffindor, I presume? Harry asked, awestruck to be addressing the founder of his house. The portrait chuckled. Indeed, young heir. Though merely paint and magic, not the man himself. I hold his memories, his mannerisms, but I am just an echo. Herr Potter has been assigned your quarters, Griphook informed the portrait. By right of blood and covenant. As it should be. Godric nodded approvingly. The password, young heir, is, Covenant Keeper, though you may change it if you wish. Harry repeated the phrase, and the portrait swung forward to reveal an entrance. Beyond lay a suite of rooms that took his breath away. The circular main chamber was easily twice the size of the Dursleys' living room, with high windows offering spectacular views of the lake and mountains. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, the stone mantel carved with lions and dragons in intricate detail. Comfortable furniture in rich reds and golds created cozy seating areas, while bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ancient-looking tomes. 4 doors led off from the main room. Griphook showed Harry through each, a bedchamber with a 4-poster bed even larger than the one in Gryffindor Tower, a private study with a desk that adjusted to his height when he approached, a bathroom featuring a tub the size of a small swimming pool, and a connecting door to what would be Professor McGonagall's office when she wasn't in her regular quarters. "This is all for me?" Harry asked, overwhelmed by the luxury after the cramped confines of his cupboard. "These are the founders' quarters," Griphook explained. Each of the 4 founders had similar apartments within the castle. They've remained unused for centuries, awaiting heirs worthy of claiming them. Harry ran his fingers along the spines of the books, noticing that while some titles were in English, others were in languages he didn't recognize, including one with angular, rune-like script that he suspected might be gobbledygook. "Those are from Gryffindor's personal collection," Griphook confirmed, following Harry's gaze. "The magic of the Covenant ensures you'll be able to understand them when you're ready." They settled at a small table near the fire, where Griphook began explaining the basics of Goblin culture and the ceremony to come. Harry listened attentively, determined to show respect for the traditions he was being invited to join. "Goblins value 3 things above all else," Griphook told him. "Craft, honor, and kinship. Our craft is legendary, the finest metalwork and stonework in the magical world. Our honor is absolute, a goblin's word, once given, is unbreakable. And our kinship is sacred, the clan structure forms the foundation of our society." "Which clan are you from?" Harry asked. "The Ironfoot clan, master stonemasons and warders. My father, Ragnarok, is not only director of Gringotts but clan chief of the Ironfoot and, by election, king of the United Clans." "King?" Harry's eyes widened. "So you're a prince?" Griphook made a dismissive gesture. "Goblin royalty is not like human monarchy. Leadership is earned through skill and wisdom, not merely inherited. I have yet to prove my worth to the clans." For the next hour, Griphook taught Harry the basic phrases he would need for the ceremony, correcting his pronunciation with surprisingly gentle patience. The Goblin language was harsh to human ears but had a rhythmic beauty once Harry began to grasp its patterns. "You learn quickly," Griphook observed after Harry successfully recited the Covenant Pledge. "Most wizards don't bother trying to pronounce our language correctly." "It's important, isn't it?" Harry said. "If I'm supposed to be a bridge between wizards and goblins, I should at least try to speak both languages." Something like approval flashed in Griphook's dark eyes. "Indeed. That attitude will serve you well, Harry Potter." Their lesson was interrupted by a knock at the portrait entrance. When Harry called permission to enter, the portrait swung open to reveal Professor McGonagall, looking somewhat harried. "Mr. Potter, Mr. Griphook," she greeted them. "I apologize for the interruption, but a situation has developed that requires our attention." "What's happened?" Harry asked, alarmed by her expression. "Word of your arrival and the Covenant's activation has spread beyond Hogwarts. The Daily Prophet has published a special edition, and reporters have gathered at the gates, demanding interviews." She pressed her lips into a thin line. "Additionally, we've received owls from several prominent wizarding families, including the Longbottoms, Bones, and Greengrasses, requesting audience with the Covenant Keeper." Griphook frowned. "The ceremony is not until this evening. Potter needs time to prepare." "I've informed them of that, but the ministry is pressing for public statements. Minister Fudge seems particularly anxious to be seen managing the situation. The disapproval in McGonagall's voice made her opinion of this approach quite clear. "What should I do?" Harry asked, looking between his two new guardians. "Nothing, for the moment," McGonagall said firmly. "You are a child, not a political pawn. The headmaster is addressing the reporters, and I've made it clear that no interviews will be granted without proper preparation and supervision." "The Goblin delegation agrees with this stance," Griphook added. "However, the arrival of the clan representatives has complicated matters. They expect to meet the Covenant Keeper before the ceremony." McGonagall nodded briskly. "That can be arranged, a brief, private introduction. But first, Mr. Potter should have lunch and perhaps some time to absorb everything that's happening." Harry felt a rush of gratitude for their protective attitudes. At the Dursleys, his feelings had never been considered important. "Could Ron and his brothers join us for lunch?" he asked hopefully. "Here, I mean. If that's allowed." McGonagall's expression softened. "I see no reason why not. It would be good for you to maintain connections with peers your own age, despite these unusual circumstances." While McGonagall went to fetch the Weasleys, Griphook continued Harry's lesson, focusing now on the 7 clans he would meet that evening. "Each clan has its specialty," Griphook explained, showing Harry emblems that represented each group. "Ironfoot are stonemasons and warders. Silverblade are weaponsmiths and warriors. Goldclaw are bankers and traders. Copperhammer are artisans and jewelers. Bronzefist are miners and earth mages. Steelbone are healers and loremasters. And Tintooth are farmers and beast tamers." "I thought all goblins worked at Gringotts," Harry admitted. Griphook's laugh was surprisingly melodic for one with such a gravelly speaking voice. "A common wizard misconception. Gringotts employs many goblins, certainly, but our nation extends far beyond banking. We have our own communities, schools, crafts, and traditions, most hidden from wizard view since the rebellions. Why hide? If the Covenant was about working together, because wizards restricted our rights," Griphook said bluntly. "After the last rebellion, the ministry classified us as beings rather than people, limiting our ability to carry wands, own property above ground, or participate in wizarding government. We retreated underground, literally and figuratively, maintaining only the banking relationship that wizards found too valuable to sever." Harry frowned. "That doesn't seem fair." "It is not," Griphook agreed. "Which is why the Covenant's reactivation matters so deeply to us. It represents a chance to renegotiate our standing in the magical world." The arrival of the Weasleys prevented further discussion of goblin politics. Fred, George, and Ron entered Gryffindor's quarters with expressions of undisguised awe, gawking at the luxurious furnishings and ancient artifacts. "Blimey, Harry," Ron breathed. "This is even better than the prefect's bathroom George and Fred snuck into last year." "You're not supposed to know about that, Ronnikins," Fred reminded him with a wink. Lunch appeared on the central table, sandwiches, fruit, and pumpkin juice for the humans, along with a separate plate of raw vegetables and smoked fish that Griphook preferred. The goblin seemed uncomfortable at first in the presence of the boisterous Weasleys but gradually relaxed as the twins drew him into a discussion of the defensive enchantments on Gringotts vaults. "Is it true there are dragons guarding the high-security vaults?" George asked eagerly. "I am not at liberty to confirm or deny specific security measures," Griphook replied with dignity, before adding with a slight smile, "though I will say that dragons respond well to certain sonic frequencies that irritate their ear canals." "Wicked," the twins chorused. As they ate, Harry told Ron about the upcoming ceremony and his crash course in Goblin language. "Can you teach me some?" Ron asked through a mouthful of sandwich. "Dad would be impressed if I could say something in gobbledygook." Griphook raised an eyebrow but didn't object when Harry tried to teach Ron the greeting phrase he'd just learned. The resulting mangled pronunciation made the goblin wince, though he appeared to appreciate the effort. "Your tongue positions are incorrect," Griphook told Ron. The KH sound comes from deeper in the throat. He demonstrated, producing a harsh, guttural noise. Ron tried again, with marginally better results. This is harder than it looks. Few wizards bother to learn, Griphook acknowledged. Which is why Potter's effort is significant. After lunch, McGonagall returned with news that the clan representatives had arrived and were waiting in the chamber of reception, a room Harry hadn't heard of before. It's on the ground floor, adjacent to the Great Hall, she explained. Originally designed for formal meetings between the founders and visiting dignitaries. It hasn't been used in that capacity for centuries, but the house elves have prepared it admirably on short notice. Harry changed into more formal attire that had appeared in his wardrobe, robes of deep burgundy with gold trim, sized perfectly for his small frame. The Weasleys wished him luck and promised to see him at the evening ceremony, which apparently would be open to all students remaining at the castle over the holidays. Griphook adjusted Harry's robes with critical attention to detail. Remember, he instructed, bow to each clan chief, right fist over heart. Repeat the greeting exactly as we practiced. Do not offer to shake hands, goblins consider the gesture invasive with strangers. What if I mess up? Harry asked nervously. You won't, Griphook said with surprising confidence. The Covenant magic will guide you. The chamber of reception proved to be a circular room with a domed ceiling depicting the night sky much like the Great Hall, though here the constellations seemed to move in patterns that Harry found mesmerizing. 7 stone plinths arranged in a circle dominated the center of the room, each bearing a different metallic emblem corresponding to the clan symbols Griphook had shown him. Standing behind each plinth was a goblin in formal attire, elaborate robes in colors representing their clans, adorned with metalwork and gemstones that caught the light from floating candles overhead. Ragnock stood at the northern position, his iron-gray robes marking him as Ironfoot clan. As Harry entered with Griphook and McGonagall, the assembled goblins turned to regard him with identical expressions of keen assessment. Harry felt his mouth go dry, but the silver crescent on his palm seemed to warm encouragingly. Covenant Keeper, Ragnock intoned formally, the 7 clans come to renew ancient bonds. Will you receive us? Drawing on his lessons with Griphook, Harry responded in carefully pronounced gobbledygook, I welcome the 7 clans with honor and gratitude. May our magic unite as in days of old. A ripple of what might have been approval passed through the goblin delegation. Ragnock's stern expression softened fractionally. Well spoken, young heir. Come forward and be known to the clans. What followed was a formal introduction to each clan chief. Harry bowed to each in turn, repeating the greeting phrases Griphook had taught him. Though he stumbled occasionally over the harsher consonants of gobbledygook, the clan chiefs responded with increasing warmth as the ceremony progressed. The chief of Silverblade clan, a battle-scarred goblin with startlingly blue eyes, presented Harry with a small silver dagger in an ornate sheath. For the Covenant Keeper, he explained in accented English. A blade of protection and promise. The Goldclaw chief gave him a small golden key. This opens no vault, she said, for this clan chief was female, but serves as a token of financial guardianship. Gringotts recognizes your right of inheritance. Each clan presented a symbolic gift reflecting their specialty, a tiny warding stone from Ironfoot, a jeweled amulet from Copperhammer, a vial of glowing earth magic from Bronze Fist, a healing charm from Steelbone, and a whistle carved from bone from Tintooth, to call friendly beasts in times of need. As Harry received each gift, the silver mark on his palm pulsed warmly. By the time he had completed the circle, returning to stand before Ragnock, the crescent seemed to shine with an inner light. The clans acknowledge you, Harry Potter, Ragnock declared. Tonight, the covenant will be fully renewed. Until then, rest and prepare yourself. The joining of magics requires strength of mind and spirit. With formal bows on all sides, the introduction concluded. As they left the chamber, Harry felt simultaneously drained and exhilarated. You did very well, McGonagall told him, genuine pride in her voice. Few adult wizards could have managed those pronunciations, let alone the proper protocols. The Covenant magic assisted, Griphook noted, but the effort was his own. The clan chiefs were impressed, particularly Steelbone and Goldclaw. Harry clutched his collection of gifts, each now stored in a pouch Griphook had provided. They were nicer than I expected. From what you said about the Goblin rebellions, I thought they might dislike all wizards. They distrust most wizards, Griphook corrected, with good reason. But you are Covenant Keeper, neither fully wizard nor goblin in their eyes, but a bridge between. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Harry was given time to rest in his new quarters, though excitement made true relaxation impossible. He paged through the photo album Remus had given him, studying the moving images of his parents with a mixture of joy and sadness. In one photo, his father stood with 3 other young men, arms slung around each other's shoulders, laughing at some forgotten joke. In another, his mother sat beneath a beech tree by the lake, copper hair glinting in sunlight as she looked up from a book with a warm smile. Harry lingered over these images, trying to memorize every detail of the parents he couldn't remember. A soft knock interrupted his contemplation. The portrait swung open to admit Remus Lupin, carrying several books and looking somewhat hesitant. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, Harry," he said. "Professor McGonagall mentioned you were resting before the ceremony, but I thought you might have questions about the album. Or about your parents." Harry immediately set the album aside and sat up straighter. "I do. Please, come in." Remus settled into a nearby armchair, his amber eyes warm with mingled affection and sorrow as they fell on the open album. "I see you found the Marauders picture." "Marauders?" Harry looked back at the photo of his father and friends. "That's what we called ourselves at school, your father, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and myself." Remus pointed to each figure in turn. "We were inseparable for 7 years. Brothers in all but blood. What happened to them? To the others, I mean." Harry had noticed that Remus was the only one from the photo who had been at the morning meeting. A shadow passed over Remus's face. "That's a complicated and painful story, Harry. One you deserve to hear, but perhaps not today of all days." Harry wanted to press for answers but sensed Remus's genuine distress at the subject. Instead, he asked, "What were they like?" "As friends, I mean." Remus's expression lightened. "James, your father, was our leader in mischief. Brave to the point of recklessness, fiercely loyal, and brilliantly clever. He could have excelled at any subject but poured his energy into Transfiguration and Quidditch instead. He was Gryffindor's star chaser, the school had never seen a better flyer." "And my mum?" Harry prompted when Remus paused, lost in memories. "Lily was extraordinary. Kind but with a temper that matched her red hair when provoked. She had a gift for seeing the best in people, giving second chances that weren't always deserved." Remus smiled wistfully. "She hated your father for years, you know. Thought him an arrogant torag, her words, not mine. It wasn't until our 7th year that she saw the man he'd become rather than the boy he'd been." Harry soaked up these details like a sponge. No one had ever told him such personal things about his parents before. "How did they die? Really, I mean. Not the car crash story." Remus hesitated, glancing toward the door as though hoping for interruption. When none came, he sighed deeply. "They were murdered, Harry. By the darkest wizard of our time, Voldemort." Despite having heard the name mentioned in the morning's meeting, Harry hadn't fully grasped its significance. "Why? Why would he want to kill them?" "That's not entirely clear, even to those of us who were close to them," Remus admitted. "James and Lily opposed him, certainly. They were members of a secret organization led by Dumbledore that fought against Voldemort and his followers. But there may have been more to it, a prophecy, some believe, though Dumbledore has never confirmed this." "And, me? How did I survive when they didn't?" Remus reached out tentatively, placing a scarred hand on Harry's shoulder. "No one knows for certain. After killing your parents, Voldemort tried to kill you too. But something happened, his curse rebounded, destroying him instead, leaving only that scar. He nodded toward Harry's forehead. That's why you're famous in our world, Harry. You're the boy who lived, the only person ever to survive the killing curse, and the one who vanquished the Dark Lord. Harry stared at Remus, unable to process this information. Him, famous? A defeater of dark wizards? It seemed impossible. I don't remember any of it, he said finally. Just a lot of green light. Green light? Remus looked troubled. That would be the killing curse itself. Avada Kedavra produces a distinctive green flash. He shuddered slightly. I'm so sorry you remember even that much, Harry. You were only a baby, 15 months old. They sat in silence for a moment, Harry trying to reconcile this new knowledge with his understanding of himself. Finally, he asked, will you tell me more about them? Not the sad parts, just, what they were like. What they enjoyed. If I'm like them at all. Relief washed over Remus's face at the change of subject. For the next hour, he shared stories of Hogwarts pranks, Hogsmeade visits, and quiet moments by the lake, painting a picture of Lily and James Potter as real people with flaws and virtues, hopes and fears, rather than the idealized shadows Harry had imagined. By the time Professor McGonagall arrived to escort Harry to the evening ceremony, he felt both emotionally drained and curiously strengthened. Learning about his parents had grounded him somehow, given him a sense of belonging, of history, that the Covenant itself had not. Thank you, he told Remus as they prepared to leave. For the album and the stories. Will you tell me more tomorrow? As many stories as you wish, Remus promised. And perhaps, if you're interested, we might begin some basic lessons in wizarding history and culture. To balance your goblin education. Harry nodded eagerly. Despite the overwhelming nature of the day's events, the prospect of learning magic, of understanding this world that should have been his all along, filled him with anticipation. The great hall had been transformed for the Covenant ceremony. The house tables were gone, replaced by concentric circles of stone seats surrounding a central dais. 7 pillars of different metals, iron, silver, gold, copper, bronze, steel, and tin, rose from the edges of the dais, each etched with runes that glowed with soft, multicolored light. The remaining Hogwarts students and staff were already seated in the outermost circle, with ministry officials and other important visitors in the next ring inward. The innermost circle was occupied by the 7 Goblin clan chiefs and selected representatives from each clan, all in formal attire that gleamed in the light of hundreds of floating candles. Conversations hushed as Harry entered with McGonagall, Griphook, and Remus. He felt acutely conscious of every eye upon him as they approached the central dais. The silver mark on his palm was now glowing visibly, casting reflections on his formal robes. Dumbledore awaited them at the edge of the dais, resplendent in robes of midnight blue spangled with silver stars that seemed to twinkle like their counterparts in the enchanted ceiling above. Harry, the headmaster greeted him warmly, "Are you prepared for the ceremony?" Harry nodded, though his heart was racing. "I think so, sir." "Excellent. Remember, the magic of the Covenant will guide you. You need only open yourself to it." With these cryptic words, Dumbledore led Harry onto the dais. In the very center stood the Sorting Hat upon a silver pedestal, looking remarkably ordinary amid the grandeur of the setting. "Friends, colleagues, honored guests," Dumbledore addressed the gathered assembly, his voice magically amplified to reach the furthest corners of the hall. "We gather tonight to witness a renewal of the oldest alliance in Wizarding Britain, the Covenant of 4 and 7, binding Hogwarts and the Goblin Nation in mutual respect and cooperation." Ragnock stepped forward to join them on the dais. "For 1,000 years," he continued in his gravelly voice, similarly amplified, "this covenant has slumbered, its terms forgotten by wizards though remembered by goblins. Tonight, through the emergence of the Covenant Keeper, we have the opportunity to restore what was lost." Together, Dumbledore and Ragnock turned to Harry. "Harry James Potter," they said in unison, "heir of Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, friend of the Goblin Nation, do you accept the role of Covenant Keeper? Drawing a deep breath, Harry responded with the phrases Griphook had taught him, first in English, then in gobbledygook, I accept this honor and responsibility. May my magic serve both peoples faithfully. Dumbledore lifted the sorting hat from its pedestal. As in ages past, the summoning hat will bind the covenant. This time, as the hat descended upon Harry's head, he was prepared for the voice that spoke in his mind, well met again, young heir. Are you ready to bridge worlds? I'll try my best, Harry thought back. That is all anyone can ask. Now, reach for the pillars with your magic. Feel them calling to you. Harry wasn't entirely sure what this meant, but he closed his eyes and concentrated on the 7 metal pillars surrounding the dais. To his astonishment, he could sense them, each emitting a distinct magical signature that resonated with different parts of his being. The iron pillar felt solid and protective, silver was sharp and precise, gold warm and prosperous, copper creative and flowing, bronze deep and elemental, steel healing and preservative, tin nurturing and connective. Without conscious thought, Harry extended his marked hand toward the pillars. 7 beams of colored light shot from the crescent on his palm, each connecting to its corresponding pillar. Where the beams touched metal, the runes brightened until they were almost too brilliant to look at. The Covenant recognizes its keeper, the sorting hat proclaimed aloud for all to hear. Let the ancient bonds be renewed. A dome of multicolored light expanded from the connected pillars, arching over the entire gathering. Where the colors merged and overlapped, new hues formed, combinations of wizard and goblin magic that had not been seen in centuries. Within the dome, Harry felt a curious sensation, as though knowledge were flowing into him from 2 directions simultaneously. Wizard history and traditions from one side, goblin culture and magic from the other, merging in his mind to form a more complete picture than either alone could provide. The hat spoke again, its voice deeper and more resonant than before. By the power vested in me by Godric Gryffindor and Ragnar I, I declare the covenant active once more. Let wizard and goblin remember their common cause. Let ancient grievances be addressed and healed. Let new understanding grow where mistrust once flourished. The dome of light began to contract, flowing back toward Harry until it centered on the silver mark on his palm. The crescent expanded, its form shifting into a more complex symbol, still crescent-shaped but now containing tiny runes along its curve, representing both wizard and goblin magic in harmonious balance. As the last of the light was absorbed into the mark, Harry felt a moment of perfect clarity, understanding his place in this new arrangement with surprising certainty. He was not just a symbol but a catalyst, not merely a bridge but an active agent of change. The hat was removed from his head, and Harry blinked in the suddenly normal light of the Great Hall. The gathered wizards and goblins were staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to calculation to skepticism. Dumbledore's hand settled gently on his shoulder. The covenant is renewed, the headmaster announced. Let us celebrate this historic moment with a feast worthy of both our traditions. The stone seats transformed into more comfortable chairs, and tables reappeared, though not separated by house as usual, but arranged to encourage mingling between wizards and goblins. As Harry stepped down from the dais, he was immediately surrounded by well-wishers from both communities. Minister Fudge pumped his hand enthusiastically. Remarkable display, my boy. Truly historic. We must arrange a formal ceremony at the ministry, of course, Order of Merlin potential, I shouldn't wonder, the Covenant Keeper will need time to adjust to his responsibilities before public appearances, McGonagall interjected firmly, rescuing Harry from the minister's effusive praise. The Goblin clan chiefs approached next, each acknowledging Harry with formal respect that nonetheless seemed warmer than their earlier interactions. The Steelbone chief, a particularly ancient goblin with silver hair and knowing eyes, examined the transformed mark on Harry's palm with evident fascination. The Covenant has chosen well, she said in surprisingly melodic English. Your magic resonates with both traditions. Unusual in one so young. I don't feel any different, Harry admitted. The Goblin chief smiled, revealing pointed teeth. You will, in time. The knowledge imparted tonight will unfold gradually as you grow ready to receive it. The feast that followed was unlike anything Harry had experienced, even the previous night's Christmas dinner paled in comparison. Wizard and goblin dishes appeared side by side, with house elves and goblin servers working in surprisingly smooth coordination. The Weasleys managed to secure seats near Harry, peppering him with questions about the ceremony and the strange lights. "I've never seen magic like that," Ron said through a mouthful of roast beef. "Dad's going to be so jealous he missed it." It felt. Harry struggled to describe the sensation. Like I was suddenly connected to everything. The castle, the goblins, all of it. Sympathetic resonance, Griphook explained from Harry's other side. The Covenant creates magical harmony between disparate elements, much like a well-crafted enchantment brings together different magical components. As the evening progressed, Harry noticed something interesting happening around the hall. Wizards and goblins who had initially kept to their own groups were gradually mingling, engaged in conversations that seemed to grow more animated and less formal as the night wore on. Professor Flitwick, who, Harry now realized, might have some goblin ancestry himself given his stature, was acting as a natural intermediary, equally comfortable in both circles. Even Lucius Malfoy, who had maintained a frosty distance for most of the proceedings, was engaged in what appeared to be a serious business discussion with the Goldclaw chief. The only person who seemed entirely disengaged was Professor Snape, who watched the festivities from a shadowy corner with an expression of profound disinterest. "Is this what the Covenant is supposed to do?" Harry asked Dumbledore when the headmaster stopped by his table. "Make everyone get along?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "Not exactly, my boy. The Covenant doesn't change minds or hearts directly, that would be a form of compulsion, which true magic rarely employs. Rather, it creates opportunities and removes certain barriers to understanding." He gestured around the hall. "What you're witnessing is not magical influence but people recognizing common interests once freed from centuries of accumulated mistrust. Will it last?" Harry wasn't sure why he asked this, but something in him needed to know whether his new role would make a genuine difference. "That," Dumbledore said softly, "depends largely on you, Harry. The Covenant provides a foundation, but the structure built upon it will require ongoing effort from its keeper." Seeing Harry's alarmed expression, he added, "Not alone, of course. You have allies in both communities now, myself included." The feast continued late into the evening, but eventually, Harry's exhaustion became impossible to ignore. After nearly falling asleep in his treacle tart, McGonagall and Griphook agreed it was time for him to retire. "The Covenant Keeper needs rest," Griphook announced to those nearby. "Tomorrow begins his formal education in both traditions." This pronouncement was met with understanding nods from the Goblin delegation and somewhat disappointed acceptance from the Wizards who had been hoping for more time with the boy who lived. The Weasley twins gave Harry exaggerated bows as he left, while Ron promised to meet him for breakfast. Back in Gryffindor's quarters, Harry changed into pajamas and climbed into the enormous four-poster bed, still somewhat disbelieving that all this belonged to him now. The events of the past 2 days swirled in his mind, from the misery of his cupboard to the wonder of Hogwarts, from complete ignorance of his heritage to bearing a magical mark that apparently made him important to 2 entire societies. As he drifted toward sleep, Harry curled his fingers around the Covenant mark on his palm, taking comfort in its gentle warmth. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and he sensed there would be many, he was no longer alone. He had guardians who seemed to genuinely care for his welfare, friends who liked him for himself rather than being scared away by Dudley, and a purpose that, while daunting, offered the chance to make a real difference. For the first time in his young life, Harry Potter fell asleep with a sense of genuine belonging, not as the unwanted burden at Privet Drive, but as a wizard, a Covenant keeper, a bridge between worlds. He couldn't know that at that very moment, in a hidden chamber far below the castle, the Goblin clan chiefs were conducting an ancient ritual of their own, one that would forge an even deeper connection between the Covenant Keeper and the magic of the Goblin nation. Nor could he know that in London, an emergency session of the Wisingamot had been called to address the implications of the Covenant's renewal, with factions already forming for and against closer Goblin relations. For tonight, at least, Harry slept peacefully, untroubled by politics or prophecy. The silver crescent on his palm pulsed softly in time with his heartbeat, sending faint ripples of magic throughout the castle, magic that strengthened ancient wards, awakened dormant enchantments, and whispered to the very stones of Hogwarts that the heir of Gryffindor had come home at last. In the portrait above the fireplace, Godric Gryffindor watched his descendant sleep with an expression of profound satisfaction. "Well done, little heir," the painting murmured. "The first step is taken. The covenant lives again." Chapter 3. Between two worlds. Harry woke to soft golden light filtering through the high windows of Gryffindor's quarters. For a blissful moment, he simply savored the comfort of the enormous four-poster bed, so different from his cramped cupboard at Privet Drive. The events of the past 2 days felt almost dreamlike in their intensity, accidental magic transporting him to Hogwarts, discovering his heritage, becoming the covenant keeper between wizards and goblins. He lifted his right hand, examining the transformed mark on his palm. The silver crescent now contained intricate runes along its curve, occasionally shifting and glimmering as if alive with magic. When he traced it with his finger, a pleasant warmth spread up his arm. A soft knock at the bedroom door interrupted his contemplation. "Mr. Potter?" Professor McGonagall's voice called. "Are you awake? Breakfast will be served in 15 minutes. And your schedule today is rather full." "Coming, Professor." Harry scrambled out of bed, still marveling at having so much space to himself. He found fresh clothes laid out on a nearby chair, simple but well-made trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a comfortable jumper in Gryffindor burgundy. As he dressed, he noticed a leather-bound book on the bedside table that hadn't been there the night before. Opening it, he found blank parchment pages with a note on the first leaf in elegant script, for the Covenant Keeper's observations. "Record what you learn of both worlds, that future generations might benefit from your unique perspective." APWBD. Harry smiled, recognizing Dumbledore's initials. He tucked the journal into his pocket before heading into the main living area, where McGonagall awaited with Griphook at her side. "Good morning, Harry," McGonagall greeted him. Though formal as ever, her eyes held a warmth he was beginning to recognize. "I trust you slept well." "Best sleep of my life," Harry admitted. "These quarters are amazing." They were designed for comfort as well as security, Griphook noted, his goblin features arranged in what Harry was learning to recognize as approval. Gryffindor understood the value of proper rest for magical growth. Breakfast appeared on the central table, a hearty spread of eggs, bacon, sausages, toast, and porridge, along with goblin flatbread and smoked fish for Griphook. As they ate, McGonagall outlined the day ahead. "We've arranged a balanced schedule between your wizarding and goblin education," she explained, conjuring a parchment timetable that floated beside Harry's plate. "Mornings will typically focus on core wizarding subjects, charms, transfiguration, potions, and so forth, while afternoons will be devoted to goblin magic and culture. Evenings will include physical training," Griphook added. "Goblins believe magical aptitude flourishes in a strong body." Harry glanced at the timetable, both intimidated and excited by its fullness. "Will I have time to see Ron and the twins?" "Indeed," McGonagall nodded. "Weekends will be largely your own, though with some structured activities. And we've arranged for you to take meals with the remaining students when possible. Social development is as important as academic." "Your first lesson today is with Lupin," Griphook said. "Wizarding history with emphasis on goblin relations, a suitable foundation. I will collect you at midday for your introduction to goblin runes." Harry nodded, trying to hide his nervousness behind another bite of toast. Yesterday had been overwhelming but exciting. Today, the reality of his new position was setting in. What if he couldn't learn quickly enough? What if he disappointed everyone? McGonagall seemed to sense his apprehension. "Remember, Mr. Potter, that no one expects mastery from you immediately. You are here to learn, not to perform miracles. Though the Covenant may grant you certain intuitions," Griphook added cryptically. Before Harry could ask what that meant, another knock sounded, this time at the portrait entrance. McGonagall called permission to enter, and the portrait swung open to admit Remus Lupin, carrying a stack of books and what looked like a rolled-up map. "Good morning, all," Lupin said cheerfully, though Harry noticed the dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well. "Ready for our first lesson, Harry?" Harry nodded, feeling more at ease with Lupin than with his other instructors. Perhaps it was the connection to his parents, or simply the man's gentle manner, but Remus felt somehow familiar despite their brief acquaintance. McGonagall rose. "I'll leave you to it, then. Harry, I'll see you at 11 for your introduction to Transfiguration. Mr. Griphook, might I have a word regarding the Ministry's latest communication?" As McGonagall and Griphook departed, Lupin settled across from Harry, spreading his materials on the table once the breakfast dishes had vanished. "How are you feeling today?" Lupin asked, his amber eyes studying Harry with genuine concern. "Yesterday was rather intense, even for adult wizards." Harry considered the question seriously. "A bit scared," he admitted. "Everyone expects so much from me, and I don't know anything about being a wizard yet, let alone this Covenant Keeper thing." Lupin nodded sympathetically. "That's entirely reasonable, Harry. You've been thrust into an extraordinary situation with very little preparation." He selected a book from his stack, a worn leather volume titled Hogwarts, A History. "Which is why I thought we'd start with context, understanding where you are and how this school came to be." The lesson that followed was unlike any Harry had experienced in his Muggle primary school. Rather than dry facts and dates, Lupin brought history to life through vivid storytelling, occasionally conjuring miniature illusions to illustrate key events. Harry learned how the four founders had come together during a time of persecution, pooling their unique magical talents to create a safe haven for magical children. Godric Gryffindor, your ancestor, was known for his dueling prowess and battlefield magic, Lupin explained, conjuring a tiny figure of a medieval wizard with a ruby-encrusted sword. But what fewer remember is his talent for forming alliances with magical beings other wizards distrusted, centaurs, mere-people, and yes, goblins. "Is that why the Covenant exists?" Harry asked. "Because Gryffindor was friends with goblins?" "Partly," Lupin nodded approvingly. Gryffindor had fought alongside goblin warriors against giant raids in the north. He respected their battle magic and craftsmanship. But it was actually Hufflepuff who created the formal alliance. Because she had goblin blood in her family somewhere? Harry recalled from earlier explanations. Precisely. Helga Hufflepuff believed in inclusion above all else. While Salazar Slytherin became known for his blood purism regarding Muggleborns, few remember that he was equally dismissive of magical beings, considering goblins, centaurs, and others as lesser creatures unworthy of wizard association. Lupin unrolled the map he'd brought, revealing an ancient parchment showing Hogwarts and its grounds in remarkable detail. The original castle was much smaller, he explained, pointing to an inner section highlighted in gold. The outer walls, towers, and many internal spaces were added during the 7 years of wizard-goblin collaboration. Harry studied the map with fascination. "This looks different from the castle now." "Good observation. Hogwarts has evolved over the centuries, some areas expanding, others becoming hidden or enchanted to serve different purposes. The room of requirement that created your clothes, for instance, was originally designed as a sanctuary for students in danger." "Like me?" Harry asked. Lupin smiled. "Exactly like you. The founders anticipated that some students might need protection beyond what their families could provide." His expression grew more serious. "Which brings us to a crucial point in wizard-goblin history, the Great Betrayal." Harry leaned forward, intrigued by Lupin's suddenly somber tone. After the founders' deaths, their descendants continued honoring the Covenant for several generations. Goblins maintained and enhanced Hogwarts defenses, while wizards ensured goblins had equal rights to wand use, property ownership, and magical education. But something changed, Harry guessed. Indeed. Around 1320, the Wizards' Council, predecessor to our modern ministry, enacted the wand ban, prohibiting non-human magical beings from carrying wands. This directly violated the Covenant, which guaranteed goblins the right to all magical tools necessary for their crafts. Lupin conjured an illusion of goblins and wizards facing off across a battlefield. The first Goblin rebellion erupted shortly after. Hogwarts became a battleground between those who supported the Covenant and those who sought to restrict Goblin rights. By the time peace was negotiated, much of the Covenant's purpose had been forgotten or deliberately obscured. Why would wizards do that? Harry asked, genuinely puzzled. If the goblins helped build Hogwarts, why turn against them? Fear and greed, Lupin said simply. Goblin magic, combined with their metalworking skills, created artifacts of extraordinary power. Some wizards coveted that power exclusively. Others feared what might happen if goblins had the same magical tools as wizards. It's an unfortunate pattern in magical history, those in power rarely wish to share it. Harry looked down at the mark on his palm. So the Covenant was supposed to prevent that? To keep wizards and goblins working together? Yes. It established rules for cooperation and mutual respect. It also created a failsafe, the summoning hat, which could identify an heir of both lineages and restore the Covenant if relations broke down. Lupin gave Harry a meaningful look. That's where you come in. But I don't know how to fix centuries of fighting, Harry protested. I'm only 8. No one expects you to solve everything overnight, Lupin assured him. The Covenant is designed to work gradually. Your role is to learn, to listen, to bridge understanding where you can. The magic will help with the rest. They continued exploring wizard-goblin history, with Harry asking increasingly insightful questions as the lesson progressed. By the time McGonagall arrived for his Transfiguration lesson, Harry had filled several pages in his new journal with notes about goblin rebellions, treaty violations, and the gradual erosion of trust between the communities. McGonagall raised an eyebrow at the subject matter. Starting with the most contentious aspects of our history, Remus. I thought it best to address the hippogriff in the room, Lupin replied with a slight smile. Harry needs to understand why the Covenant matters, not just what it does. A fair point. McGonagall turned to Harry. Well, Mr. Potter, shall we move from history to practical magic? Harry's Transfiguration lesson proved both challenging and fascinating. Rather than beginning with wand work, McGonagall focused on magical theory, explaining how transfiguration required not just incantations but visualization, intention, and respect for the fundamental laws of magic. Transfiguration is perhaps the most dangerous and complex magic you will learn, she told him, conjuring a simple matchstick onto the table. It is not merely changing an object's appearance but its essential nature. Done improperly, the consequences can be severe. She demonstrated by transforming the matchstick into a needle, then back again. Before you receive your wand at 11, you'll develop the mental discipline required for such transformations. The physical conduit, the wand, is merely the final component. Harry practiced visualization exercises, focusing intently on the matchstick and imagining every detail of its transformation into a needle. To his surprise, after his third attempt at concentrated visualization, the matchstick shivered slightly on the table. McGonagall's eyebrows shot up. Remarkable. Wandless effects at your age are extremely rare, Mr. Potter, even with direct bloodlines to founders. Is it the Covenant? Harry asked, staring at his marked palm. Perhaps, McGonagall said thoughtfully. Or simply natural talent. Your father showed exceptional aptitude for transfiguration as well. After his lesson with McGonagall, Harry joined the remaining students in the Great Hall for lunch. The atmosphere was noticeably different from previous meals. The 4 house tables were back, but several goblin representatives sat at each, engaged in conversation with students. At the Gryffindor table, Fred and George were attempting to teach a young goblin clerk their variation of exploding snap, while Ron was listening, wide-eyed, to a goblin warrior describing underground training facilities. Harry. Ron waved him over eagerly. This is Nagnok. He's telling us about goblin dueling chambers. Harry sat beside his friend, greeting the warrior with the formal goblin gesture he'd been taught, right fist over heart, slight bow of the head. Nagnock returned the gesture with evident approval. "Covenant Keeper," he acknowledged. "Your wizard lessons go well." "Yes," Harry replied, helping himself to a sandwich. "Professor Lupin taught me about the Goblin rebellions and why they happened. Professor McGonagall says I have a talent for transfiguration." As expected, Nagnock nodded. "Gryffindor blood runs strong in transformation magic. Your Goblin heritage may enhance certain aspects as well." Ron gaped at Harry. "You have Goblin blood too?" Very distantly, Harry explained, repeating what he'd learned about his mother's ancestry. Through Hufflepuff's daughter and a Goblin-descended family. The conversation drifted to other topics as more students joined them. Harry noticed how freely the younger children interacted with the Goblins compared to the older students, who seemed more reserved and occasionally skeptical. Even within Gryffindor, opinions appeared divided. One sixth-year prefect kept a noticeable distance from the Goblin visitors, while Percy Weasley, who had arrived that morning, was earnestly discussing banking regulations with a Gringotts representative. Promptly at 1 o'clock, Griphook appeared at Harry's side. "Time for your first Goblin lesson, Herr Potter." Harry said goodbye to his friends and followed Griphook from the Great Hall. Rather than returning to Gryffindor's quarters, they descended several flights of stairs, moving deeper into the castle than Harry had yet explored. "Few wizards know of this place," Griphook explained as they reached what appeared to be a dead end in a dimly lit corridor. "It was created during the original construction, a space for Goblin representatives to work within Hogwarts." He pressed his palm against the stone wall and spoke several harsh syllables in gobbledygook. The stones rearranged themselves, revealing a doorway that opened onto a chamber unlike any Harry had seen in the castle. Low-ceilinged but spacious, the room was lit by crystalline formations that glowed with amber light. The walls were covered in metallic inlays forming intricate geometric patterns that seemed to shift subtly as Harry watched. In the center stood a low table surrounded by cushioned benches rather than chairs, and alcoves around the perimeter held strange instruments and tools that hummed with magical energy. "The Chamber of Craft," Griphook announced with evident pride. "Untouched by wizard magic since the last Goblin delegation departed Hogwarts in 1612. "It's amazing," Harry breathed, turning slowly to take in the entire space. "I can feel the magic in the walls." "The Covenant mark enhances your sensitivity," Griphook confirmed. "This chamber is saturated with Goblin magic, earth magic, stone magic, metal magic. These are the foundations of our craft and culture." Harry settled on one of the benches as Griphook laid out materials for their lesson, sheets of hammered copper, silver etching tools, and what looked like liquid gold in a small stone bowl. "Goblin magic begins with understanding materials," Griphook explained. "While wizards channel magic through wands, wooden conduits disconnected from their source, goblins work directly with elemental substances. We shape magic as we shape metal, through discipline and precise intention." The lesson that followed was utterly different from Harry's wizard training. Where McGonagall had emphasized theory and visualization, Griphook focused on tactile connection and resonance. Harry learned to feel the inherent magical properties of different metals, the protective strength of iron, the malleable conductivity of copper, the purifying essence of silver. "Your palm," Griphook instructed, "place it flat against the copper sheet and close your eyes. Listen with your magic, not your ears. Feel the metal's song." Harry did as instructed, pressing his marked palm against the cool metal surface. At first, he felt nothing beyond the temperature contrast with his skin. Then, gradually, a subtle vibration emerged, a humming resonance that traveled up his arm and echoed in his chest. "I feel it," he whispered, eyes still closed. Like music without sound." "Good," Griphook's voice held rare warmth. "Now, direct that resonance. Wish for the metal to protect, and channel that intention through your mark." Harry concentrated, focusing on concepts of safety and shelter. The humming intensified, and he felt the Covenant mark grow warm against the copper. When Griphook finally instructed him to open his eyes, Harry gasped, the previously blank copper sheet now bore a faint but unmistakable pattern of interlocking shields, similar to the runes in his covenant mark. "I did that?" he asked, astonished. "The covenant did, working through you," Griphook corrected. "But your intention guided it. This is how goblin magic differs from wizard casting, we collaborate with materials rather than commanding them." By the end of the 2-hour lesson, Harry had produced a small copper talisman engraved with protective runes, crude by goblin standards, Griphook admitted, but impressive for a first attempt by someone of primarily wizard blood. "Carry this with you," the goblin instructed as Harry threaded the talisman onto a leather cord. "It will strengthen as your understanding deepens. The magic you've invested will resonate with your own essence, offering protection tailored specifically to you." Harry slipped the cord around his neck, feeling the talisman warm against his skin. "Thank you for teaching me." Griphook inclined his head. "It is my honor as your goblin guardian. Few wizards have shown genuine interest in our methods. Fewer still have the capacity to work with metal magic." They left the Chamber of Craft, the stone doorway sealing seamlessly behind them. As they climbed back toward the main floors of the castle, Harry noticed Griphook repeatedly glancing at a small metallic device resembling a pocket watch. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Griphook hesitated before answering. "Perhaps. There has been unrest since the ceremony. Not all wizards welcome the Covenant's revival. Like Mr. Malfoy." Harry recalled the blonde wizard's skepticism during the initial meeting. "Malfoy is merely the public face of opposition. Others work more subtly." Griphook tucked the device away. "But that is not your concern yet. Focus on your education." Despite this reassurance, Harry sensed real worry behind Griphook's composed exterior. The remainder of the afternoon passed with physical training, basic strength exercises and balance work that left Harry pleasantly tired but energized. Dinner in the Great Hall revealed further evidence of changing dynamics between the castle's residents and their goblin visitors. Some students who had initially kept their distance were now cautiously engaging, while diplomatic representatives from the ministry observed from the high table with expressions ranging from approval to barely concealed alarm. Harry spent the evening in Gryffindor's quarters with Ron and the twins, showing them his copper talisman and describing the Chamber of Craft. "Bloody brilliant," Fred marveled, examining the metalwork. "Dad would go mental if he knew you were learning actual goblin magic. They guard their methods jealously. Wonder if they'd let us try," George mused. "We've been experimenting with enchanted objects for our pranks. Goblin techniques could take things to a whole new level." "I could ask Griphook," Harry offered. "Though I think the Covenant mark helps me work with the metal. Without it, it might be harder." Ron, who had been flipping through Harry's history notes, looked up with a puzzled expression. "It says here goblins could use wands before the 1320 ban. But all the stories I've heard make it sound like they never had them." "That's because wizard history gets rewritten by the winners," came a new voice from the portrait entrance. Remus Lupin stood there, carrying more books and a rolled parchment. "Sorry to interrupt your evening, but I thought Harry might like these for additional reading." The boys welcomed him in, and soon Lupin was drawn into their conversation about goblin magic. Harry was struck by how easily Remus balanced authority with approachability, explaining complex historical conflicts without talking down to any of them. "The truth," Lupin told them as they gathered around the fire, "is that early wizard-goblin relations were much more integrated than modern wizards prefer to remember. Goblins attended Hogwarts alongside human students during the Founders' era. They carried wands, owned land above ground, even held positions on early wizarding councils." "What changed?" Fred asked, unexpectedly serious. "Power dynamics always evolve," Lupin sighed. "As wizard population grew and unified politically, many became uncomfortable with sharing magical knowledge and territory. The wand ban was just one manifestation of increasing segregation." "That's not fair," Harry frowned. "No, it wasn't," Lupin agreed. "Which is why the Covenant was so revolutionary for its time, and why its revival now makes many in the Ministry nervous. It challenges centuries of established hierarchy. The conversation continued until McGonagall arrived to shoo the Weasleys back to their dormitory, reminding everyone of curfew. Before leaving, Ron promised to meet Harry for breakfast the next morning. "I'm glad you're making friends," Lupin remarked once they were alone. "James, your father, believed friendship was its own form of magic. He valued his friends above almost everything else." "Except my mum?" Harry guessed. Lupin smiled. "Eventually, yes. Though it took him years to convince her he was worth her time." His expression grew more serious. "Harry, I wanted to speak with you privately about something. During tomorrow's lessons, you'll have your first meeting with Professor Snape." "The potions master?" Harry recalled the sallow-faced, dark-haired man who had watched the proceedings with apparent disinterest. "Yes. Severus is complicated. He knew your mother quite well, they were childhood friends before Hogwarts. But he and your father were bitter rivals during school." "He didn't like my dad?" Harry asked, suddenly anxious. "That would be an understatement," Lupin admitted. "Their animosity was legendary, and I'm afraid Severus may project some of those feelings onto you, given your resemblance to James." "That's not fair," Harry protested. "I didn't do anything to him." "No, you didn't," Lupin agreed. "And in a perfect world, Severus would separate past grievances from present circumstances. But I thought it best to prepare you, so you're not caught off guard by any coldness he might display." Harry nodded, appreciating the warning even as he wondered what his father could have done to inspire such lasting dislike. "Thanks for telling me." After Lupin departed, Harry prepared for bed, his mind whirling with everything he'd learned. The weight of his new responsibilities pressed on him, yet alongside the anxiety ran a current of excitement. For the first time, he was learning not just about magic but about his heritage, his parents, the complex world he belonged to by birthright. He fell asleep with the copper talisman clasped in his hand, its gentle warmth a reminder of the day's achievements. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern, mornings devoted to wizarding subjects, afternoons to goblin training, with meals and evenings for social interaction and independent study. Harry discovered that each instructor approached magic differently. McGonagall emphasized precision and discipline, Flitwick taught the artistry and emotional components of charms, Sprout focused on harmonizing with living magic in plants. His lesson with Snape proved as challenging as Lupin had warned. The potions master made no effort to hide his distaste when Harry entered the teaching laboratory. "Potter," he said, the name itself seeming to leave a bitter taste in his mouth. "Our new celebrity." Throughout the lesson, Snape alternated between ignoring Harry completely and subjecting him to cutting remarks about his father's arrogance and whether it had been inherited along with his appearance. Only when Harry demonstrated a careful approach to ingredient preparation, skills developed through years of cooking for the Dursleys, did Snape's hostility marginally decrease. "At least you're not entirely hopeless," the professor conceded grudgingly at the lesson's end. "Your mother had an intuitive grasp of potions. Perhaps you've inherited something of value from her side." From most teachers, this would hardly qualify as praise, but coming from Snape, Harry sensed it represented a significant concession. His goblin education progressed more smoothly. After metal magic, Griphook introduced him to stoneworking, explaining how the very foundations of Hogwarts contained goblin runes that strengthened the castle's defenses. In the Chamber of Craft, Harry learned to listen to different stones: granite's steady resilience, marble's crystalline clarity, obsidian's protective sharpness. Each responded differently to the Covenant mark, accepting his magical influence in unique ways. "The stones remember," Griphook told him as Harry successfully activated a series of ward stones arranged in a circle. "They hold the memory of the Covenant in their structure. That is why the castle recognized you immediately, the stones themselves knew their heir had returned." During physical training, Harry worked with Nagnok, the warrior who had befriended Ron. While wizard children typically didn't begin combat magic until their later Hogwarts years, Goblin education incorporated defensive movements from an early age. Harry learned basic stances and blocking techniques, developing strength and coordination that would serve both his magical and physical development. Throughout these busy days, Harry became increasingly aware of tensions brewing beyond Hogwarts walls. Daily copies of the Daily Prophet chronicled heated debates in the Wizengamot regarding the Covenant's legal standing. Some articles praised the potential for improved wizard-goblin relations, others warned of goblin encroachment on wizard sovereignty. Harry's name appeared frequently, descriptions ranging from miraculous covenant keeper to unwitting pawn in goblin machinations. On his 5th morning at Hogwarts, Harry entered the Great Hall for breakfast to find an unusual tension in the air. The goblin delegates were huddled in urgent conversation at one end of the high table, while Dumbledore and several professors spoke in low, serious tones at the other. Even the students seemed subdued, whispering among themselves rather than engaging in the usual morning chatter. "What's going on?" Harry asked Ron as he slid onto the bench beside him. Ron passed him the morning's prophet. "Look at the front page." The headline blared in bold type, "Ministry officials question Covenant legitimacy, emergency session called to examine so-called ancient agreement." Below was a photograph of a stern-looking witch identified as Dolores Umbridge, senior undersecretary to the minister, standing before the Wizengamot. The accompanying article quoted her extensively. "This alleged covenant has never been officially recognized in ministry records," Madame Umbridge stated during yesterday's emergency session. "We cannot allow unverified magical artifacts like the Sorting Hat to dictate policy regarding goblin-wizard relations. The sovereignty of the ministry must be preserved." Sources close to the undersecretary revealed that legislation is being prepared to formally invalidate any extra-legal agreements predating the establishment of the ministry, which would include the so-called Covenant of 4 and 7. Minister Fudge declined to comment directly, stating only that all aspects of this unusual situation are being carefully examined with the wizarding community's best interests at heart. Harry looked up from the paper, his stomach clenching with anxiety. Can they do that? Just cancel the covenant? "Dad sent me an owl this morning," Ron said quietly. "He says it's complicated. The ministry doesn't usually interfere with Hogwarts' internal affairs, but they're claiming this affects national security because of the goblin involvement." "It's rubbish," Fred interjected, leaning across the table. "Pure political maneuvering. The old pureblood families don't want goblins gaining more rights." "Malfoy's probably behind it," George added. "His father has the minister's ear and half the Wizengamot in his pocket, according to Dad." Harry's gaze drifted to the high table, where Griphook now stood in animated conversation with Ragnarok, both looking grim. As if sensing Harry's attention, Griphook glanced his way, giving a short nod that clearly meant, "We'll talk later." The day's lessons proceeded despite the underlying tension. Harry found it difficult to concentrate on Flitwick's explanation of charm theory when his mind kept returning to the prophet's headline. By midday, when he arrived at the Chamber of Craft for his goblin lesson, his anxiety had grown into genuine worry. Griphook was waiting with uncharacteristic restlessness, pacing the chamber while consulting the strange metallic device Harry had noticed before. "The situation is deteriorating," the goblin said without preamble. "The ministry seeks to undermine the covenant before its full effects can manifest. Because they don't want goblin rights to expand?" Harry asked, recalling Fred's assessment. "Precisely. The covenant would restore our right to wand use, property ownership above ground, representation in magical governance, all privileges stripped away over centuries." Griphook's dark eyes flashed. "Some wizards find this prospect threatening. What happens if they succeed? If they invalidate the covenant somehow?" Griphook's expression darkened. Goblin-wizard relations would likely deteriorate beyond repair. The Goblin Nation would view it as the final betrayal, proof that wizards cannot be trusted to honor even their most ancient agreements. "Another rebellion?" Harry asked, remembering Lupin's history lessons. "Perhaps. Though in modern times, our response would be economic rather than military. Gringotts could cease operations. Goblin-crafted artifacts could be recalled from wizard ownership. The magical economy would collapse within weeks." Harry's eyes widened at the implications. That would hurt everyone, wizards and goblins. Indeed. Which is why cooler heads must prevail. Griphook set aside his device and gestured for Harry to join him at the central table. Today's lesson takes on new urgency. We will work with silver, the metal of bonds and oaths. The lesson focused on creating a small silver amulet designed to strengthen magical agreements. As Harry worked the metal under Griphook's guidance, feeling it respond to his covenant mark, the goblin explained the deeper purpose. This charm, when completed, will allow you to sense the integrity of magical bonds, particularly those connected to the covenant. It may prove crucial in the days ahead. Harry concentrated on infusing the silver with his intention, watching as delicate runes appeared in the soft metal. What can I do to help stop the ministry from breaking the covenant? For now, continue learning, Griphook advised. Build your understanding of both traditions. The covenant chose you not only for your bloodlines but for your potential to bridge worlds. That potential must be developed before it can be fully employed. Later that evening, after dinner in the Great Hall, where the atmosphere remained tense, with several ministry observers now openly monitoring interactions between students and goblin delegates, Harry was summoned to Dumbledore's office. To his surprise, the circular room was crowded with people, McGonagall, Griphook, and Ragnarok, but also Lucius Malfoy, Minister Fudge, the stern witch from the Prophet, Umbridge, and Madame Bones from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. "Ah, Harry," Dumbledore greeted him calmly, though Harry detected strain beneath his serene exterior. "Thank you for joining us. These representatives from the ministry wish to ask you some questions about the covenant." Harry approached cautiously, acutely aware of the conflicting energies in the room. The covenant mark on his palm tingled uncomfortably, responding to the tension. "Mr. Potter," Umbridge began in a falsely sweet voice that immediately set Harry's teeth on edge, "we're trying to understand exactly what happened when you put on the sorting hat. Did anyone instruct you to do this? Perhaps suggest it might have special effects." The implication was clear, they suspected manipulation. "No, ma'am," Harry replied truthfully. "I was curious about the hat after Professor Dumbledore explained what it does during the sorting ceremony. No one told me to put it on. And these, physical changes," she continued, gesturing toward his marked palm, "did you consent to them? Were you warned that placing the hat on your head might permanently alter you magically?" Harry glanced at Dumbledore, uncertain how to respond. The headmaster gave him a slight nod, encouraging honesty. "No, I didn't know what would happen. But I'm not upset about it. The mark helps me learn both kinds of magic, wizard and goblin." "Yes, about that," Umbridge's smile tightened. "These goblin lessons you've been receiving. Don't you find it concerning that creatures known for their greed and cunning have taken such an interest in a vulnerable child?" Harry felt a flare of indignation. "They're not creatures," he corrected firmly. "They're people with their own culture and magic. And they've been nothing but kind to me." Madame Bones intervened before Umbridge could respond. "Mr. Potter is right, Dolores. The official ministry classification of goblins as beings acknowledges their personhood, whatever your personal views might be. The question remains," Lucius Malfoy interjected smoothly, "whether an 8-year-old child can legally consent to the magical obligations this covenant apparently imposes." By all accounts, the mark appeared without warning or explanation. "If I may," Ragnarok spoke for the first time, his gravelly voice commanding attention. "The covenant does not require consent in the wizard legal sense. It responds to magical bloodlines and need. Potter's arrival at Hogwarts, fleeing mistreatment by his Muggle guardians, activated ancient protections that predate your ministry by centuries." "Convenient," Umbridge sniffed. "A magic beyond ministry regulation that just happens to grant goblins unprecedented access to wizard institutions and the boy who lived." Madam Undersecretary, McGonagall's voice was frigid, "I remind you that Hogwarts operates under its own charter, granted by the Wizards' Council and reaffirmed when the ministry formed. The covenant falls within the school's autonomous magical authority." The debate continued, growing increasingly technical as various statutes and precedents were cited. Harry listened carefully, understanding more than the adults perhaps realized. The real issue wasn't legal at all, it was about power and who held it. Finally, during a pause in the arguments, Harry spoke up. "May I say something?" The adults turned to him with varying expressions, Dumbledore encouraging, McGonagall approving, Umbridge dismissive, Fudge nervous. "The Covenant isn't about taking power from wizards or giving special treatment to goblins," Harry said, choosing his words carefully. "It's about working together, like the Founders and the Goblin clans did when they built Hogwarts. I'm still learning what it means to be the Covenant Keeper, but I know it's not meant to hurt anyone, it's meant to heal old wounds." He lifted his marked palm. "This connects me to both traditions. I can feel wizard magic and goblin magic, and they're different but complementary. Shouldn't we be trying to understand how they can work together instead of arguing about which one matters more?" A brief silence followed his words. Then, surprisingly, Minister Fudge cleared his throat. "Well put, my boy, well put indeed. Perhaps we are approaching this from the wrong angle. A collaborative examination of the Covenant's properties might be more productive than legislative action at this stage." Malfoy's lips thinned with displeasure, while Umbridge looked as though she'd bitten into something sour. Madame Bones, however, nodded approvingly. "I propose a compromise," she suggested. "A joint Wizard-Goblin committee to study the Covenant's historical precedents and current manifestations, with regular reports to both the Ministry and Gringotts Directorate. No legislative action to be taken until the committee presents its findings." "A reasonable approach," Dumbledore agreed quickly. "Ragnarok, would the Goblin nation find this acceptable?" The Goblin King considered for a moment before nodding. "Provided the committee has equal representation and genuine authority, we would participate in good faith." Details were negotiated over the next hour: committee composition, reporting structure, timeline for findings. Throughout, Harry noticed the silver amulet he'd crafted with Griphook growing warmer against his chest, pulsing gently whenever the discussion moved toward genuine agreement. By the time the Ministry officials departed, a fragile compromise had been reached. The Covenant would remain in effect while being studied, Harry would continue his education under joint guardianship, and formal negotiations would begin regarding the restoration of specific Goblin rights. "You spoke well, Harry," Dumbledore told him once only the Hogwarts contingent and Goblin representatives remained. "Sometimes the simplest truths are the most powerful." "Indeed," Ragnarok agreed, studying Harry with newfound respect. "The Covenant chose wisely. You think beyond the boundaries others accept without question." Harry felt both proud and embarrassed by their praise. "I just said what felt right. And therein lies the Covenant's wisdom," Griphook observed. "It seeks balance, not dominance. A lesson many on both sides have forgotten." The following days brought gradual changes to the political landscape. The Prophet reported on the formation of the Joint Covenant Research Committee, presenting it as Minister Fudge's diplomatic solution to a complex magical situation. Behind the scenes, Harry learned from Griphook, intense negotiations were underway between Goblin clan leaders and ministry departments regarding specific rights and responsibilities. Harry's education continued at its intensive pace, now supplemented by occasional attendance at committee meetings where his unique perspective was sought. He found these political sessions exhausting but recognized their importance to the Covenant's future. In his wizarding studies, Harry showed particular aptitude for defense against the dark arts, taught by a nervous young wizard named Quirrell, and charms, though he made steady progress in all subjects. His Goblin training expanded to include rudimentary ward construction and the basics of gobbledygook language. The Covenant Mark facilitated his learning in both traditions, often providing intuitive understanding when concepts seemed most foreign. Mid-January brought the return of Hogwarts students from holiday break, transforming the quiet castle into a bustling school once more. Harry's presence, and the continued presence of Goblin delegates, caused considerable sensation. Some students regarded him with awe, others with suspicion, but most simply with intense curiosity. "Is it true you can speak to goblins in their own language?" Can you really do wandless magic because of that mark? Are you going to be sorted into a house or do you get your own special status? The questions were endless, and Harry did his best to answer honestly without inflaming tensions. The Covenant's political implications had created divisions among the student body, largely reflecting their families' positions. Children from traditional pureblood families tended to view the Goblin presence with distrust, while those with less rigid backgrounds showed greater openness to change. Harry found unexpected allies in his integration with the regular student population. Neville Longbottom, a shy Gryffindor first year, overcame his natural timidity to defend Harry when others questioned his role. Susan Bones, niece of Madame Bones, used her family connection to correct misconceptions about the Covenant's legal standing. Even Draco Malfoy, Lucius's son, maintained a cautious neutrality rather than the open hostility Harry might have expected given his father's position. By February, a new rhythm had established itself. Harry attended selected classes with first years during regular school hours while continuing his specialized training during evenings and weekends. He took meals in the Great Hall, developed friendships across houses, and gradually became less of a spectacle and more simply another, albeit unusual, member of the Hogwarts community. The Goblin delegation had reduced in size but maintained a permanent presence, with representatives rotating between Hogwarts and Gringotts. Griphook remained Harry's primary Goblin guardian, his serious demeanor occasionally softening as Harry's skills developed. One memorable afternoon, after Harry successfully constructed a complete ward circle from scratch, the young Goblin actually smiled, a rare expression that transformed his stern features. "You have exceeded expectations, Herr Potter," Griphook told him. "Few wizard-born have achieved this level of Goblin craft in so short a time." "The Covenant helps," Harry said modestly. "The Covenant enables," Griphook corrected. "The achievement is yours. You have approached our traditions with genuine respect rather than mere curiosity. The difference matters." Outside Hogwarts, progress on Goblin-Wizard relations moved in fits and starts. The research committee produced preliminary findings confirming the Covenant's historical authenticity, undermining Ministry attempts to dismiss it as mere legend. Negotiations regarding wand rights proceeded cautiously, with proposals for limited licensing rather than full repeal of the wand ban. Economic discussions proved more productive, with new agreements on Goblin property rights nearing completion. As winter gave way to early spring, Harry began to believe that the Covenant's revival might truly succeed in healing ancient divisions. Then, in late March, everything changed. Harry woke one morning to find Griphook at his bedside, the Goblin's expression grave. "Dress quickly," Griphook instructed. "There has been an incident." "What kind of incident?" Harry asked, immediately alert. "A break-in at Gringotts. A high-security vault was targeted, one containing an artifact linked to Hogwarts' founding era. The connections to the Covenant are concerning." In Dumbledore's office, Harry found a crisis gathering underway. The headmaster looked unusually somber, while Ragnock and several clan chiefs spoke in rapid gobbledygook too complex for Harry to follow. McGonagall and Snape stood to one side, their usual animosity temporarily suspended as they examined a charred piece of parchment. "Harry," Dumbledore greeted him with strained calm. "Thank you for coming so promptly. We face a situation that may require your unique abilities." Ragnock turned to him, dark eyes flashing with barely contained anger. "Covenant Keeper, a sacred trust has been violated. The Founder's Casket, a repository containing personal effects of Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, was stolen from its vault last night. The thieves left this in its place." He handed Harry a small metal token similar to the one Ragnock had given him at their first meeting, but this one was black and bore a different symbol, a broken sword crossed with a shattered wand. The moment Harry's fingers touched it, the Covenant mark on his palm burned painfully. A vision flashed through his mind, a shadowy chamber, walls lined with the same broken sword emblem, figures in hooded robes gathered around a stone altar where a small chest rested. "I can see it," he gasped. "Where they've taken the casket. It's in a chamber with these symbols everywhere." "The Sundered Brotherhood," Griphook growled. Extremists who believe the Covenant should never be restored. Mixed membership, Ragnarok added grimly. Disaffected goblins who resent wizard authority and pureblood wizards who despise goblin rights. United only in their determination to maintain separation between our peoples. Can you locate this chamber, Harry? Dumbledore asked gently. Through the Covenant connection. Harry closed his eyes, concentrating on the vision. The Covenant mark throbbed as he focused, revealing more details: rough stone walls, the scent of underground dampness, distant sounds of water. It's underground, he said slowly. Not Gringotts, older. There are carved figures on the walls, creatures with human heads and animal bodies. The ancient catacombs, Snape spoke for the first time. Beneath Knockturn Alley. They predate modern London by centuries. A logical choice, Ragnarok nodded. Neutral territory, accessible to both species, largely forgotten by authorities. What do they want with the casket? Harry asked, opening his eyes. What's inside it? The adults exchanged glances before Dumbledore answered. Personal artifacts with powerful magical signatures, items that hold essence of both Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. Combined with certain dark rituals, they could be used to disrupt the Covenant permanently. By attacking its source, Griphook clarified. The Covenant draws strength from the Founders' bloodlines and intent. Corrupting their personal items could sever that connection. We must recover the casket before their ritual is completed, Ragnarok declared. A joint wizard-goblin team would never penetrate their defenses undetected, Snape interrupted. The Brotherhood will have ward-crafters from both traditions protecting their location. All eyes turned to Harry. The Covenant Keeper, McGonagall said slowly. His mark would allow passage through wards keyed to either magical tradition. Absolutely not, Griphook and McGonagall spoke in unison, then glanced at each other in surprise at their agreement. He's a child, McGonagall continued firmly. We cannot send him into danger. For once, I concur with Minerva, Snape added. Whatever Potter's magical connections, he lacks the training and experience for such a mission. Harry, however, was studying the black token, feeling the connection between it and his Covenant mark. Something told him this was precisely why he had been chosen, not just to learn and bridge cultures, but to act when both were threatened. I think I have to go, he said quietly. Not alone, obviously. But I don't think anyone else can get past their wards without setting off alarms. Out of the question, McGonagall repeated, more forcefully. Perhaps, Dumbledore intervened, a compromise. Harry's presence may indeed be necessary, but he need not be unprotected. A small team, one wizard, one goblin, both highly skilled in defensive magic, could accompany him, remaining hidden until needed. Debate erupted, with various proposals and objections raised by all sides. Throughout, Harry remained focused on the token and the vision it had triggered. The Covenant mark continued to pulse, almost as if trying to communicate urgency. Eventually, a plan took shape. Harry would lead a small rescue team consisting of Lupin, whose defense expertise and personal connection to Harry made him the logical wizard choice, and Nagnok, the goblin warrior whose combat skills were unmatched among the delegation. They would enter the catacombs that evening, using Harry's Covenant connection to navigate the wards without triggering alarms. The remainder of the day passed in intense preparation. Harry's regular lessons were cancelled in favor of crash courses in ward detection and emergency defensive magic. Though he couldn't perform complex spells without a wand, Lupin taught him several wandless shielding techniques that relied more on intent than precise incantation. Nagnok, meanwhile, equipped him with goblin-crafted protective gear, a lightweight vest of dragon hide beneath his robes, boots enchanted for silent movement, and a silver cloak pin that would alert Nagnok if Harry's heartbeat elevated dangerously. You should not need to fight, the warrior told him sternly. Your role is navigation and ward passage only. At the first sign of danger, you will retreat behind Lupin and myself. By nightfall, final preparations were complete. A portkey had been created to transport them to an abandoned shop in Knockturn Alley, near one of the hidden entrances to the catacombs. From there, Harry would use his connection to the Black Token to guide them to the Brotherhood's ritual chamber. "This is a reconnaissance and retrieval mission only," Dumbledore instructed as they gathered in his office for departure. "Avoid confrontation if possible. The casket is your priority, not apprehending the Brotherhood members. And Harry's safety supersedes even the casket," McGonagall added firmly. Griphook approached Harry, pressing something into his hand, a small copper disc engraved with protective runes. "Keep this with you," the goblin instructed. "It's connected to your talisman, strengthening its protections." Harry tucked it into his pocket, touched by Griphook's concern. "I'll be careful." "See that you are," Griphook replied gruffly. "You still have much to learn about goblin metallurgy. I expect you back for tomorrow's lesson on goldworking." With final instructions given and goodbyes said, Harry grasped the port key, an ordinary-looking quill, alongside Lupin and Nagnock. A hook-like sensation seized him behind the navel, and the world dissolved into swirling color before reforming as a dusty, abandoned shop filled with cobwebbed shelves and broken furniture. "Nocturne Alley," Lupin whispered, peering cautiously through a grimy window. "Stay close, Harry. This isn't a place for children, even in daylight." They slipped out a rear door into a narrow, twisting alleyway dimly lit by sickly green lamps. Harry immediately sensed the difference between this place and Diagon Alley, where the main wizarding street felt vibrant with positive magic. Nocturne exuded an aura of decay and malevolence that made his skin crawl. Nagnock led them to what appeared to be a dead end behind an abandoned apothecary. The goblin pressed his hand to a seemingly random brick, muttered something in gobbledygook, and a section of wall silently receded, revealing rough stone steps descending into darkness. "The old way," Nagnock explained softly. "Built when goblins and wizards first established London's magical quarter, before the international statute of secrecy drove everything above ground into hiding." They descended cautiously, Lupin lighting their way with a softly glowing wand tip that cast just enough illumination for safe footing without broadcasting their presence. The air grew damper and cooler as they moved deeper underground, the modern stonework gradually giving way to ancient, rough-hewn passages that predated even Hogwarts. After several minutes of careful progress, they reached a junction where 7 different tunnels branched off in various directions. Harry felt the black token grow warm in his pocket. Removing it, he saw that one of the broken sword symbols now glowed faintly green. "This way," he whispered, indicating the 3rd tunnel from the left. As they advanced deeper into the catacombs, Harry began to sense magical barriers, invisible fields of energy that made his covenant mark tingle. Some felt sharp and precise, wizard wards based on specific spells, while others had a heavier, more solid quality that he recognized from his training as goblin protections. At each barrier, Harry instinctively knew what to do. For wizard wards, he extended his marked palm, letting the Covenant's connection to Gryffindor's bloodline create a passage. For goblin barriers, he spoke simple phrases in gobbledygook that came to him spontaneously, identifying himself as a recognized friend of the clans. "Remarkable," Lupin murmured after watching Harry dismantle a particularly complex ward without conscious effort. "The Covenant truly does work through you, not just on you." They progressed deeper, guided by Harry's growing sensitivity to the casket's location. The carvings he had seen in his vision began to appear on the walls, sphinxes, chimeras, and other hybrid creatures watching their passage with stone eyes that sometimes seemed to follow their movement. Finally, they reached a massive stone door carved with the Brotherhood's broken sword and wand emblem. Beyond it, Harry sensed multiple magical signatures, both wizard and goblin, and the distinctive resonance of the founder artifacts he had glimpsed in his vision. "They're in there," he whispered. "Maybe a dozen people. The casket is on some kind of altar in the center." Nagnock and Lupin exchanged glances. "Too many for direct confrontation," the goblin warrior assessed. "We need a diversion." Lupin nodded thoughtfully. "Or an infiltration. Harry, could your covenant mark get us through this door undetected?" Harry studied the carved emblem, feeling the complex layers of ward magic embedded in the stone. "I think so. But once we're inside, they'll see us immediately. There's nowhere to hide in the chamber, it's just a big circular room with the altar in the middle. Unless, Lupin mused, we had a way to remain unseen. He reached into his robes and withdrew a shimmering, silvery cloth that seemed to flow like water. Your father's invisibility cloak. I've been holding it for when you were older, but I think James would approve of its use tonight. Harry stared at the cloak with wonder, another connection to his father materializing when he least expected it. It will hide all three of us. It's unusually powerful, Lupin explained. Most invisibility cloaks fade with time or can be penetrated by certain detection spells. This one has special properties. A true cloak of invisibility, Snuck breathed, examining the fabric with expert eyes. Not goblin-made, yet bearing similarities to our concealment weaves. Remarkable. Their plan quickly took shape. Harry would open the door using his covenant mark, then all three would slip inside under the invisibility cloak. They would work their way to the altar, seize the casket, and retreat before the Brotherhood realized what was happening. The ritual appears incomplete, Lupin observed, peering through a tiny crack in the door. They've arranged ceremonial daggers and bowls around the casket but haven't yet opened it. We have time. Harry placed his marked palm against the stone door, concentrating on harmonizing with the wards rather than breaking them. The covenant magic responded, creating a subtle resonance that temporarily aligned his magical signature with the Brotherhood's protections. With a faint click, the massive door unlocked. Now, Snuck whispered, cloak. Lupin swirled the silvery material around all three of them. Harry felt a strange sensation as the cloak settled, not just visual concealment but a deeper magical obscuring that seemed to muffle their very presence. Together, moving with careful coordination, they eased the door open just enough to slip inside, then closed it silently behind them. The chamber beyond matched Harry's vision exactly, circular, with rough stone walls covered in Brotherhood emblems, illuminated by floating green flames that cast eerie shadows. Around the central altar stood 12 figures in hooded robes, 6 tall enough to be wizards, 6 of goblin height. They were engaged in a complex ritual, moving in patterns while chanting in an alternating rhythm of Latin and gobbledygook. On the altar itself sat a small, ornate chest of dark wood banded with gold, the founder's casket. Under the cloak's concealment, they began inching toward the altar, carefully navigating around the ritual participants. Harry kept his focus on the casket, which seemed to pulse with a magic that resonated with his covenant mark. The closer they got, the stronger the connection became, until he could almost feel the founder's artifacts inside, a gauntlet that had belonged to Gryffindor, a cup that had been Hufflepuff's, both imbued with their original owner's magical essences. They were halfway to the altar when disaster struck. A tall Brotherhood member turned suddenly, sweeping his arm out in a ritual gesture directly into their path. Unable to dodge in time, Lupin's shoulder brushed against the outstretched hand. The hooded figure froze. Intruders, he shouted, grabbing at the air where he had felt contact. The Covenant Keeper comes. Chaos erupted. The ritual circle broke apart as Brotherhood members drew wands or weapons, casting detection spells and striking out blindly toward where they had heard movement. Change of plan, Snuck growled, drawing a short, curved blade from his belt. Lupin, clear a path to the door. Potter, get the casket. I'll provide defense. Before Harry could protest, the goblin warrior rolled out from under the cloak, immediately engaging the nearest Brotherhood members with a flurry of blade work that drove them back in surprise. Simultaneously, Lupin emerged on the opposite side, his wand ablur as he cast shield charms and stunning spells to create confusion. Go, Harry! Lupin shouted. The cloak will protect you. Still invisible, Harry dashed toward the altar. A Brotherhood wizard, sensing movement, cast a wide area spell that made the air ripple with visible currents. The invisibility cloak's magic held, but Harry felt the covenant mark burn in warning, this type of detection magic would find him soon. Reaching the altar, he seized the casket with his marked hand. Instantly, a powerful connection formed, the Covenant magic recognizing the Founder's artifacts and responding with a surge of protective energy. The casket, heavy with magical security measures, lightened in his grasp as if eager to be rescued. "He has the casket," screamed a Goblin Brotherhood member, somehow sensing the transfer of magical possession despite Harry's invisibility. Spells and thrown weapons converged on the altar. Harry ducked instinctively, clutching the casket to his chest. To his amazement, the Covenant mark flared with silver light that penetrated even the invisibility cloak, creating a shimmering shield around him that deflected the attacks. "The Covenant protects its keeper," Snuck shouted triumphantly, using the distraction to disable 2 more Brotherhood members with swift strikes. Lupin, meanwhile, had cleared a path to the door, stunning or binding several attackers. "Harry, this way," he called, somehow sensing Harry's position despite the cloak. Harry ran toward Lupin's voice, the casket held tightly against his chest, its magic harmonizing with his Covenant mark to strengthen the protective shield around him. Spells bounced off the silvery barrier, leaving him untouched but illuminating his invisible progress with each impact. Snuck fought his way to them, providing rear guard as they reached the door. "Open it, Potter," the warrior commanded. "Your mark is keyed to their wards now." With his free hand, Harry touched the door, channeling Covenant magic through his palm. The massive stone slab swung open, revealing the passage beyond. "Go." Snuck shoved Harry through, then followed with Lupin close behind. The moment they were clear, the Goblin slammed his blade against a specific point in the wall. With a rumbling groan, the ceiling of the tunnel directly in front of the door collapsed, creating a temporary barrier against pursuit. "Well done," Lupin panted, helping Harry to his feet while keeping his wand trained on the collapsed section. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Harry assured him, pulling the cloak down to reveal himself. "The Covenant protected me." As was its purpose, Snuck nodded, examining the casket in Harry's arms. The Founders built safeguards into their legacy to protect both their bloodlines and their intentions. When threatened, the Covenant's power manifests most strongly. They retreated quickly through the catacombs, taking a different route than their entry path. Harry noticed that the casket seemed to guide their journey, growing warmer when they chose correct passages and cooler when they strayed. Within 30 minutes, they emerged from a different exit, a concealed doorway in the back room of a small Diagon Alley shop that Lupin identified as belonging to a friend of Dumbledore's. A Patronus message, Lupin's Silver Wolf, was dispatched to Hogwarts, and within moments, Dumbledore himself appeared with a flash of phoenix fire, Fawkes on his shoulder. "You succeeded," the headmaster said with evident relief, examining the casket without touching it. "And without serious injury, I'm pleased to see." "The Covenant protected Harry," Lupin explained, describing the silver shield that had manifested during the confrontation. "Most extraordinary," Dumbledore murmured. "Though perhaps not unexpected. The Covenant was designed to preserve itself through its keeper." He turned to Harry. "May I?" Harry handed over the casket, though he felt a curious reluctance to part with it. The moment it left his hands, the connection diminished, his Covenant mark cooling to its normal temperature. "We should return to Hogwarts immediately," Snuck advised, keeping watch at the shop's window. "The Brotherhood will regroup quickly. They have resources in both communities." With another burst of phoenix fire, Fawkes transported them directly into Dumbledore's office, where McGonagall, Griphook, Ragnock, and several professors waited anxiously. Harry found himself immediately engulfed in a rare hug from McGonagall, while Griphook examined him with critical concern, checking for injuries or magical damage. "The casket is secure," Dumbledore announced, placing it carefully on his desk. "Thanks to Harry's unique abilities and the courage of his companions." While the adults discussed the implications of the Brotherhood's attempt and planned security measures to prevent future incidents, Harry studied the casket with growing curiosity. Now that immediate danger had passed, he could feel the artifacts inside more clearly, their magical signatures distinctly similar to the Covenant mark's energy. "Can I see what's inside?" he asked during a lull in the conversation. The adults exchanged glances before Ragnock nodded. The Covenant Keeper has earned that right. The casket will open to his touch now that it has recognized him. Harry approached the desk, extending his marked palm toward the ornate chest. At his touch, the complex locking mechanisms disengaged with a series of musical clicks. The lid opened to reveal two objects nestled in velvet lining, a golden gauntlet set with rubies and a small cup of finely wrought gold with a badger engraved on its side. Gryffindor's gauntlet and Hufflepuff's cup, Dumbledore explained. Not their most famous artifacts, the sword and diadem claim that distinction, but perhaps their most personally significant. These items were crafted during the founding of Hogwarts, imbued with their magical essences specifically to strengthen the castle's protections. And the Covenant, Griphook added. These artifacts are connected to the Sorting Hat, all created during the same period of Wizard-Goblin collaboration. Harry felt drawn to touch the items but restrained himself, sensing their immense magical potency. What would the Brotherhood have done with them? Corrupted them, Ragnarok said grimly. Twisted their magic to break rather than strengthen the Covenant. Had they succeeded, the damage might have been irreversible, not just to the Covenant itself but to Hogwarts' foundational magic. The implications were sobering. For the first time, Harry fully grasped the weight of responsibility the Covenant had placed on him, not just to learn and bridge cultures, but to actively defend the very magic that made such bridging possible. In the days that followed, security throughout the wizarding world tightened considerably. The Daily Prophet reported on the thwarted attempt by extremist elements to steal priceless historical artifacts, though details of the Covenant's involvement were carefully managed to minimize panic. The Brotherhood went underground, their members scattered but presumably still committed to their separatist ideology. Aurors and Goblin security forces established unprecedented cooperation in tracking suspected members, using the incident as a catalyst for joint operations previously considered impossible. At Hogwarts, Harry's training intensified. His instructors, now acutely aware of the practical applications of his education, adjusted their teaching to emphasize protective magic and threat recognition. Lupin focused on defensive spells that Harry could trigger through his Covenant mark even without a wand, while Griphook accelerated lessons in Goblin warding techniques. The Brotherhood's failure will not deter them permanently, Griphook warned during one particularly demanding session. They will adapt, perhaps seeking other means to undermine the Covenant. You must be prepared. Why do they hate the Covenant so much? Harry asked, working to inscribe protection runes into a silver bracelet. What's so threatening about wizards and goblins working together? For some, it is simply fear of change, Griphook explained. The world they know, with its clear boundaries and established hierarchies, feels safe despite its inequities. Others have more practical concerns. Goblin access to wands might shift magical power dynamics significantly, threatening those who benefit from the current system. And the goblins in the Brotherhood? What do they gain from keeping the separation? Griphook's expression darkened. Some of my kind have grown to prefer isolation, believing wizard society inherently corrupt and untrustworthy. They fear integration would weaken goblin culture rather than enrich both traditions. A short-sighted view, but understandable given our history of mistreatment. As April bloomed across the Hogwarts grounds, the Joint Covenant Research Committee finally released its comprehensive findings. The report, hundreds of pages long, confirmed the Covenant's historical authenticity, legal standing, and magical significance. More importantly, it presented concrete recommendations for implementing its original provisions in a modern context. The evening after the report's release, a formal ceremony was held in the Great Hall. Representatives from the Ministry, Gringotts, the Wisengamot, and all 7 Goblin clans gathered to witness the signing of what was being called the Renewed Accord, a formal treaty incorporating the Covenant's principles into contemporary magical law. Harry, seated between McGonagall and Griphook at the high table, watched with a mixture of pride and amazement as Minister Fudge and King Ragnarok signed the historical document with a quill crafted from a phoenix feather and a nib of goblin-forged silver. By this agreement, Fudge announced to the assembled dignitaries, we acknowledge the wisdom of our ancestors and commit to a new era of cooperation between wizard and goblin nations. The provisions herein shall be binding upon all magical institutions within British jurisdiction. The key provisions, read aloud by Madam Bones, included, graduated restoration of wand rights for goblins, beginning with educational and crafting licenses, expanded above-ground property ownership for goblin families and businesses, goblin representation on key ministry committees affecting interspecies relations, wizard acknowledgement of goblin crafting rights, including reclamation provisions for certain artifacts, joint educational initiatives, including exchange programs between Hogwarts and Goblin training academies, formal recognition of the Covenant Keeper's role as a diplomatic bridge between communities. This last provision brought all eyes to Harry, who fought the urge to sink lower in his seat. Dumbledore, sensing his discomfort, rose to address the gathering. "The Covenant has blessed us with a remarkable young keeper," the headmaster said, his voice warm with genuine affection. "But we must remember that Harry is, first and foremost, a child deserving of normal development and education. While his role is significant, our primary duty is to ensure he grows into it naturally, without undue pressure or exploitation." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall, and Harry shot Dumbledore a grateful look. The ceremony concluded with a symbolic exchange of gifts, Fudge presenting Ragnarok with a ceremonial wand permit bearing the Ministry's golden seal, Ragnarok offering Fudge a goblin-crafted medallion symbolizing mutual prosperity. As magical witnesses to the accord, Harry and Dumbledore added their signatures beneath the principal signatories, Harry's covenant mark flaring briefly as his name joined the document. During the celebratory feast that followed, Harry found a moment of quiet reflection at a window overlooking the lake. The past months had transformed his life beyond recognition, from an unwanted burden in a Muggle household to a magically significant bridge between ancient communities. The weight of responsibility sometimes felt overwhelming, yet he couldn't deny the sense of purpose it had given him. Heavy thoughts for one so young, came a familiar voice. Remus Lupin joined him at the window, 2 mugs of hot chocolate in hand. Harry accepted the offered drink gratefully. "Just thinking about everything that's happened. It doesn't feel quite real sometimes." "I imagine not," Lupin smiled gently. "Your parents would be extraordinarily proud, you know. Not because of the Covenant or the political achievements, but because of how you've handled yourself through it all, with courage and compassion." "Do you think they would have understood?" Harry asked quietly. "The Covenant, I mean. It's so complicated, and I'm still figuring it out myself." James had a remarkable capacity for adaptation, Lupin recalled fondly. When faced with the unexpected, he typically embraced it rather than resisted. And Lily, well, she had an innate sense of justice that would have recognized the Covenant's fundamental fairness. "So yes, I believe they would have not only understood but championed your role in it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Lupin spoke again. "You know, arrangements have been made for this summer. I won't have to go back to the Dursleys." Hope colored Harry's voice. "Never again," Lupin assured him firmly. "The renewed accord includes a special provision for your guardianship, joint custody between magical guardians. During term, you'll continue residing at Hogwarts under Professor McGonagall's supervision. Holidays will be divided between wizarding and goblin households." "Goblin households?" Harry repeated, surprised. "I'll stay with goblin families." "With Griphook's family specifically," Lupin clarified. "The arrangement is unprecedented, no wizard child has lived among goblins in centuries. But the Covenant specifically calls for its keeper to understand both cultures intimately." The prospect both excited and intimidated Harry. "What about you? Will I see you during holidays too?" Lupin's smile widened. "As it happens, I've been appointed your wizarding tutor on a permanent basis. I'll accompany you during both your wizard and goblin residencies to maintain educational continuity. And..." He hesitated briefly. "Dumbledore has arranged for us to spend August at Potter Cottage in Godric's Hollow, your family home, restored after the damage it sustained the night your parents died." Emotion welled in Harry's throat. "My home? Our actual house? Your heritage," Lupin nodded. "Part of your birthright, like so much else you're rediscovering." As the evening celebrations continued around them, Harry felt a sense of completion he'd never experienced before. The Covenant had given him more than a magical role or political significance, it had given him a place in both worlds, a connection to his past, and a purpose for his future. The next morning, the Founder's casket was formally installed in a specially constructed vault beneath Gryffindor's quarters. Harry, as Covenant Keeper, participated in the complex security enchantments that would protect the artifacts while allowing their magic to strengthen Hogwarts' foundations. The ceremony, witnessed by representatives from both wizard and goblin communities, symbolized the renewed trust between the ancient allies. As spring blossomed into early summer, Harry's unique position within Hogwarts solidified. He continued his dual education, making remarkable progress in both traditions. Weekend visits to Hogsmeade with the older students, under McGonagall's watchful eye, and occasional trips to Diagon Alley for meetings at Gringotts expanded his understanding of the wider wizarding world. Through it all, the Covenant mark on his palm continued to evolve, the runes shifting periodically to reflect his growing knowledge and magical development. Griphook explained that the mark would continue changing throughout his life, recording his journey as Covenant Keeper in a magical script only he could fully interpret. On the final evening of June, as most Hogwarts students prepared to board the train home for summer holidays, Harry stood on the astronomy tower with Dumbledore, watching the sun set over the Forbidden Forest. A remarkable year, the headmaster observed. From a frightened child in a cupboard to a bridge between worlds in just 6 months. Harry smiled, thinking of the incredible journey. I still don't understand everything about the Covenant or why it chose me specifically. The deepest magic rarely explains itself fully, Dumbledore replied. But I suspect the Covenant recognized in you something essential, a natural capacity for seeing beyond boundaries and finding common ground where others perceive only divisions. Will it last? Harry asked, voicing the concern that occasionally troubled him. The agreement between wizards and goblins, I mean. The Brotherhood is still out there, and some people at the Ministry still don't seem happy about goblin rights expanding. Dumbledore considered the question thoughtfully. Lasting change is never guaranteed, Harry. Prejudice and fear have deep roots in any society. But what you've helped create is a framework for progress, a foundation upon which future generations can build. He placed a gentle hand on Harry's shoulder. The Covenant didn't make you important, Harry. You made the Covenant important by how you've chosen to honor it. Remember that distinction in the years ahead. As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing one by one above the ancient castle, Harry felt the Covenant mark pulse warmly, not with warning or magical activation, but with something that felt remarkably like contentment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them not as the unwanted boy from Privet Drive, but as Harry Potter, wizard and Covenant Keeper, bridge between worlds. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, his first extended stay in a goblin household, continued training in both magical traditions, eventual preparation for formal Hogwarts education alongside peers his own age. The path wouldn't always be smooth, the balance between worlds not always easy to maintain. But tonight, watching the castle lights reflect on the dark lake below, Harry knew with bone-deep certainty that he had found his place at last. Not just in the wizarding world, not just among the goblin clans, but in the space between, the ancient, magical connection that reminded both peoples of what they could accomplish together. Ready to begin the next chapter? Dumbledore asked gently. Harry nodded, the Covenant mark glimmering silver in the starlight. Ready. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.